I'm 34 years old and go by Oliver. My lack of conversation during family gatherings isn't due to shyness or a lack of ideas. When no one is actually listening, it's simply easier to keep silent. I've always been the one that repairs things and is dependable. Who covers the costs? When no one else arrives who does, my family no longer expresses gratitude. I believe they lost sight of the fact that I was accomplishing anything at all. I was the oldest growing up. I am 5 years older than my sister Emily, who discovered at the age of 12 that she could get away with murder if she complained long enough. If I protested to her, she would take my belongings, destroy them, and then have a fit. My mother would chastise me for hurting her feelings. Dad would complain that I had to take care of your sister. Perhaps I reasoned things would alter as we grew older. It didn't. I immediately found a job after graduating from college. Entry-level employment isn't particularly attractive, but I put in a lot of effort and was promoted every few years. I didn't travel much or go out to parties. After Dad lost his job, I helped Mom and Dad pay off their second mortgage by saving money. Helped Emily go through college when she failed to apply for financial assistance and changed her major 3 times. But when Mom's automobile broke down, she got a new one. I believe that accomplishing all of it had significance, that they witnessed it, perhaps even valued it. As it happens, it just rendered me invisible. The afternoon was a Sunday, one of those imposed family meals when everyone ignores one another for the remainder of the month after acting like they care for 2 hours. I didn't have time to create the apple pie my mother requested, so I brought one from the grocery. When she opened the door, she hardly gave me a glance. When it occurred, we were halfway through our lunch. Even though I had been paying the heating bill for the previous 3 winters, Dad was still whining about it. Emily was hardly paying attention as she browsed through her phone. Mum was grinning and drinking her wine as if nothing had happened. Emily grinned and stated it as if it were a joke after looking up. He is simply resentful that he is no longer needed. She used the casual cruelty individuals use when they know they can get away with it, but she didn't even say it maliciously. Everyone chuckled. Mum, too. Like me, even Dad. Some of the washed up have been trying to stay relevant. Something broke inside of me. I didn't yell, toss my plate, or bang my fists. I just took out my phone, opened it, and gave Emily a direct look. Let's check your mood. Silently, I said, when all of the bills in this house are canceled. For the first time in years, they became silent. They treated me as though I were genuine. I gently browsed through my stored logins after getting up and moving away from the table. Utilities? Insurance? Payments for cars? Streaming services? Even the rent for Emily's downtown apartment. They were unaware that I had also been covering that. Every time she neglected to send it to me, you wouldn't risk it. Mum remarked, her voice trembling slightly. Give me a try. Dad got to his feet but remained silent. Emily searched her phone for me as like she was trying to determine whether I had finally grown up or whether this was all a ruse. The money was no longer the main concern. It has to do with how simple it was for them to forget. The roof was being held up by me. Every birthday was missed, and I discreetly resolved all of their crises. Every insult that I was too serious to be single, too dull, I ignored it. That's what family does, I thought. Now, however, I now just felt as though I had been sacrificing my own dignity to pay for their comfort. I give it 3 days. I turned to face the door and stated that. How long will you laugh without me? The stillness followed me all the way to the car as I left. My hands were trembling from relief, not apprehension. It seemed like I was finally letting go after holding my breath for years. 20 minutes later, there was a first call followed by another, and yet another. All of them were disregarded, but it was the message that eventually caused me to pause and look at my screen. Emily provided that one. Only 2 words. You're playing a bluff. And since I wasn't, I grinned. I didn't respond. I simply sat with the windows rolled up and the motor off in my car outside my apartment building, gazing at the message. You're playing a bluff. She was the one. Even now, with my public criticism of her and my promise to pull the rug out from under the entire circus they were staging, she still thought I was the doormat brother and was too weak to follow through. Her glittering, chaotic life's background noise. I opened my laptop, walked upstairs, and changed into something cookier. Everything was very simple. I had everything connected since I had spent years putting it up for them. AutoPay stored login information, connected emails, and my name on the majority of accounts. They never once questioned it, even if it was occasionally the sole name. Why would they? I served as their backup plan. They have a built-in safety net. I started by turning off their power bill's AutoPay feature. The water comes next. Next, the internet. I let them work things out on their own for another month. Not disaster, but enough time to cause mayhem. Their lives were too important to me to damage. Whose hands had been preventing the walls from collapsing, I wanted to remind them. Emily's rent. Then came it. I uninstalled my payment method and accessed the property management portal. As a co-signer, I was mentioned. She had not been able to get a loan because of her bad credit, nor would she ever thank me for it. 5 days were left to pay the rent. She had plenty of time to panic. I lingered over the login for Mom's auto insurance. She never figured out how to utilize the app on her own. She would contact me whenever her card expired and tell me to be kind to Ali. Please fix it for me, as if I were the butler for the family. Click. Cancelled. I had a buzzing phone that night. I had to quiet it and put it face down a lot. Missed calls and group conversations erupted. Dad left a message that began calmly and concluded with hardly concealed rage. I received 3 consecutive texts from Emily. Everyone more desperate than the previous, all snarky. Whoa, too little too much. Well, you got your message across. Just repair it, please. This isn't funny anymore, Allie, really. It felt fulfilling, even though it might not have been hilarious. For the first time since I became an adult, I thought I was in charge. Over myself, not simply over others. It wasn't until I experienced the freedom of saying no that I realized how far the animosity had spread. The tone shifted after the 3rd day. My mother texted me. No salutations. There is no punctuation. Our electricity went off. Then another. Why are you treating us like this? The meal was not mentioned at all. It's not an apology, not even a query. Simply assign responsibility. As if I'd screamed without cause. As if I had overreacted to some innocuous remark about their wickedness. I didn't respond. Someone I hadn't spoken to in years called me that evening. Jake, my cousin. Before my parents felt he was a terrible influence and gradually removed him from our lives, we were close as children. He was aware of the social media backlash. Emily's posts are passive-aggressive. The cryptic remarks made by my sister-in-law and those who have forgotten the value of family. He sent me a message. Finally, 2 words escaped. I told him everything. We conversed till 2 in the morning. That discussion, it was more meaningful to hear someone remark, "Dude, it's about time," than any of the phony grins my family had given me during the previous 10 years. Jake made me think of that me before I was buried in responsibility, before I was a living, breathing bank account. Emily arrived at my residence on the 4th day. At first, I didn't answer the door. After waiting and knocking 5 times, she sent an SMS. "I'm outdoors. Please." She seemed worn out. It's rocked, but not broken. The arrogant, contemptuous attitude had vanished. She held her phone in a shield-like manner. Her customary expensive jacket was replaced with a more casual one, and her makeup was a little smeared. I noticed, even though it was subtle. I leant against the doorframe after opening it just enough. "What are you looking for? Can we have a conversation?" I remained still. I said something I didn't mean. She made a short addition during lunch. "I don't know, it was a joke. I get you know. You understand me." I said, "And nobody stops you." She took a swallow. "I apologize." "All right." I remained silent. After a while, she continued, "This month I need a little help. Rent only. The management is making threats." My eyebrows go up. She hesitated, then exhaled, as if she was reluctant to provide the next detail. I am aware that I made a mistake. All of us did. However, you can't simply shut them off in that way. We are related. That's right. I said, we are related. Perhaps you ought to have behaved accordingly. I didn't anticipate that landing so hard. Her face dropped, and I briefly caught a glimpse of the girl. Before the manipulation she was, prior to the entitlement. Then, however, she stood up straight. "Ollie, you're not alone in your troubles. You aren't a hero." When I smiled, it was without warmth. I had no desire to be. I wanted to express my gratitude, or perhaps someone would inquire about my well-being. Occasionally, she remained silent. "You all need to learn how to stand on your own, in my opinion." "I've done my part," I added. "I'm done being the hero." I shut the door after that. The next day, Dad gave a call, no voicemail, this time. It was just a missed call, then another, and yet another. I didn't answer. However, he wrote me a message later that evening that completely stopped me cold. "You got your message across. However, I would prefer to speak with you directly once you have finished punishing us." I looked at it for a while, not because I was willing to provide forgiveness. It sounded like he saw me for the first time in years, not because I was interested. I took a while to reply to Dad's SMS. Over the course of the next day, I read it several times again in an attempt to understand the tone of those lines. Was it real manipulative? Was that only the first step in a lengthy effort to make me feel bad about turning on the water again? Or did it seem more like a wall crack? I wanted to think that it was true. That perhaps just possibly he was prepared to talk to me as a human being rather than as a representative of the house of dysfunction. However, I had already been duped by it. Too many times my expectations were dashed just to be dragged back into the same old cycle of obligation guilt and well-masked contempt. Nevertheless, I consented to meet. We decided on a neutral location, an old cafe that is midway between his and my neighborhoods. I got there early. I sat in the far corner so I could observe who entered out of habit. There was a knot in my gut. I also couldn't stop tapping my foot under the table, despite my best efforts to convince myself that I didn't give a damn about what he thought. 10 minutes late, Dad had arrived with his typical jacket and a frown that appeared to have been carved rather than worn. When he saw me, he looked about as if he were anticipating a trap. His expression remained the same. He sat across from me, grunting at the waiter as he placed his coffee order. I waited. He sighed at last. "Oliver, I didn't bring you up to be resentful. His opener was that." "No, how are you?" "No. I appreciate you meeting me, that's all." For a long time I looked at him. I was not raised by you. That caused him to wince. And I briefly noticed how old he was. The wear in his eyes, the lines that had grown deeper since our last meaningful encounter. However, he bounced back as fast as ever. "You believe that since we didn't have a parade, we didn't value what you did equally," I answered. "I believe that since you anticipated it, you didn't appreciate it. As if it were my work. It was your responsibility. The oldest is you." A sour chuckle sprang in my breast. "That's it then. I was chosen as the designated provider by you and your mother. The one who fixes things, the one who never complains and covers everything. You never refused." Almost defensively, he said, "I never believed I could." Leaning forward, I said, "I learned that from you. I learned from you that love has conditions. That I wasn't being family if I didn't comply with your wishes. You made her believe that the world owes her for simply existing, Emily." Well done on it. He didn't say anything for a while, but looked down at his coffee and stirred it without taking a sip. "I'm not flawless," he whispered. "We're not. But you guys treated me more like a resource than a human being," I added. "I made bill payments. I co-signed contracts. I purchased automobiles, and none of you ever gave the cost of it to me any thought." "How much did it cost you?" he inquired. This time it's quieter. I took a deep breath. I responded in a hushed tone. "Time. Calm. A genuine opportunity to live a life beyond simply controlling yours." I didn't take any holidays. I couldn't risk going away, so I missed promotions. Friendships were lost. I was defeated. My jaw became tight as I halted. I became someone else. Dad's shoulders drooped a little. For what seemed like an eternity, we sat in quiet. At last he turned to face me, glanced closely. He answered, "I didn't know about all that." I pondered. "I assumed you were just more responsible and that you were all right." "I was accountable. No one else would be so," I said. "And for it, you all punished me." Slowly he nodded. Something had changed in the air between us, now less charged. Raw. "I spoke with your mum," he continued. "She finds it difficult to acknowledge her mistakes. She is aware that we overpushed you nevertheless. She refuses to speak it. Not quite yet. But she is aware that I didn't respond. And Emily," he said, "is still angry, but I believe she's also afraid because she doesn't know how to look after herself. That's what we did to her, a little too late." "Will you switch the lights back on?" Not rudely, he asked. "Just be truthful." I gave a head shake. "Not quite yet." As if anticipating that response, he nodded once more. I got up to go, but he stopped me with one more item. "I was afraid when you were born, you know. I had no idea how to be a father. I reasoned that it would be sufficient if I just kept you safe, covered your expenses, and provided a roof over your head. I equated giving with love. And I said that what I did wasn't." He looked directly into my eyes. Now I realize it was. I apologize that it took me losing it to realize. Nothing else could be said. Without turning around, I walked out of the cabin. I woke up that night and stared at the ceiling. My phone broke. Emily was back. This time, only one message. "You despise me." "I know, I need help, but I deserve it. Give me a call, please." I didn't respond. I needed her to endure that pain, not because I intended to harm her. To experience what it was like before I was the one who hurried to make things right. I received a warning from the property management business via email the next morning. Late fines were applied to Emily's rent, which was technically past due. Eviction notice is the next step. The house of cards suddenly started to collapse. I went over the notice of eviction 3 times. Emily had ran out of lifelines for the first time in years, not because I didn't think it was true. She was now teetering on the brink of repercussions after the safety net she had trampled over throughout her entire life was finally gone. Would never touch her, she thought. I didn't grin. I refrained from boasting. That's the part of revenge that people don't get. It doesn't feel as fantastic as you anticipated. There is no confetti or fanfare included. It's just silent and motionless, akin to observing what remains after a storm while standing on the coast. That morning I went to work as usual. I had coffee, responded to emails, heard a client complain about their printer, and offered them the same remedy I've offered 100 times. Around lunchtime, Emily's future began to slowly fall apart in the background. I received a call from an unidentified number. I didn't respond. A voicemail a minute later. Mum was the one. There was something more underneath the tight, controlled tone of her speech. I hadn't heard it in a long time. Oliver, be afraid. It's your mum. I am aware of your distress. We are. All of us are rattled. There's problems for your sister. And I believe that enough time has passed. Your point has been made. Could we please have a conversation? You are missed. Don't apologize. Just the gentle mother manipulation she has spent a lifetime perfecting. The sort that hawks around barbed wire. I removed the message. Emily returned to my flat that weekend. She had her hair in an untidy bun when I saw her. She has dark circles beneath her eyes. Lovely. Too large for her. She had changed in appearance, or simply the authentic one, after all the misdirection and makeup had finally come off. This time she sat on the floor outside my door without knocking. I gave her more than an hour to sit there. Twice I heard her phone ring. She whispered into it that he wasn't responding. Then there was stillness once more. She said at last through the door, "You were correct. I didn't open it. I took advantage of you. All of us did." Furthermore, I doubt I ever realized how awful things went. You know, you were simply there all the time? Similar to the couch that has the water heater on it. We didn't consider the amount of pressure you were under. I heard her voice tremble as she hesitated. The apartment was gone to me. I phoned my parents after the boss gave me a week to get out. But at the moment, they lacked the funds. Additionally, I am unsure about where to go. Something inside of me twisted in my chest. Not sympathy, but acknowledgement. The type of feeling you get when someone finally notices the same storm that you've been stuck in by yourself. "I apologize," she muttered. "I sincerely apologize." I pulled the door open. She gazed up at me for a long time, red-eyed and worn out. Neither of us said anything. Then I moved out of the way to let her in. She didn't sob on the ground or collapse into my arms. She entered the room in silence, sat down on the couch, and took in the surroundings as if for the first time. We conversed, had a real conversation. She told me that she felt hollow recently, that pursuing attention had taken the place of real connections, and that she could still hear her father assuring her that she was unique, even if she hadn't earned it. She assumed I enjoyed doing it since that's what everyone kept telling her, even though she knew I had been the one who had to pay for everything. I informed her that she was not welcome in my life, if everything was simply going to be the same, because there was no safety net in me, that I wasn't an errand guy or a bank account, that I required room, show respect, limitations, things we didn't have as children. She gave a nod. "I'll look for another place to stay." I simply had to say this. "I said you may remain here." "A week. That's all." All right. We didn't give each other hugs, not on that particular day. However, we spent hours simply conversing while seated on different sides of the couch. That was the start of something new. Mum called again the following day. This time I responded. She became soft once again. How she was anxious and relieved that we were getting back in touch. She then requested that I speak with the electricity company on their behalf. "They're acting irrationally," she remarked, abruptly interrupting us. Not even a warning was given to us. I informed her that I had stopped participating in any of their accounts, that they would need to solve it on their own. It wasn't warmly received by her. "We're being punished by you." Sharply, she said, "following everything we've done for you." I chuckled. Something brief and without humor. "Everything you have done for me, you were reared by us, fed you, protected you. Mum, that's the very least you can do as a parent." She fell silent. I said I'm not furious anymore. I'm not going back, though. It will be on new terms if you choose to have a connection with me, actual ones. Not only giving me a call to pay a debt, and this is farewell if we are unable to reach a consensus on it. There was a long silence in the line. She hung up after that. I didn't return the call. Emily moved into a little apartment on the outskirts of town 2 weeks later. She took on 2 part-time positions. For the first time in her life, she went to a dog grooming shop and a bookshop. She was creating a budget, preparing food, gaining the ability to support oneself. We now speak nearly every other day. Genuine discussions, not only demands or diversions. We listened even if we occasionally disagreed. It was honest even though it wasn't flawless. Since then, neither parent has phoned. That's okay with me. I still occasionally think about them, about how much I desired their affection and acceptance. However, I've come to a realization that took me decades to comprehend. I don't require it. I once thought that having a family meant having responsibilities, and that the degree of love was determined by one's capacity for sacrifice. That being the one in charge meant being the one who was forgotten. I am aware of the reality now, though. Love, silence, self-erasure, or becoming useful to gain a place at the table are not requirements of true love. True love respects and sees you. Make room for yourself. Additionally, it was the first time in my life. I have created room for me. In my own life, I reactivated the lights, and I will never again go black. Story 2. Hello, I'm Odilon. I can confirm that my sister humiliated me in front of everyone by standing up at our mother's will reading. She grinned as if it were her favorite pastime and referred to me as the family error, as if I were an afterthought. However, she was unaware that everything had been revised by our mother. They believed the truth had been buried. However, what if I was buried alive with the truth? Awaiting receipts, stay put. Because what followed did more than simply make a room quiet. It put an end to a lie-based legacy. It's only 2 days. The notification. I received a stiff white envelope that smelled like old paper and had embossed lettering when I went to my apartment in Atlanta. The reading will take place 2 days prior. No heads up, no call, just the letter like a challenge sitting on my doormat. Callista promised to keep me updated. That was at the funeral 2 weeks ago. She meticulously prepared the funeral, even the press announcement sent to the Alumni Association, and the hue of the flowers. I hardly had time to bid my mother farewell in privacy. This now. With the unread letter resting on my lap, I sat on the sofa and grabbed the silk scarf from the drawer on my side table. Soft and cream in tone with fading blue embroidery. J.M. Marin Jacqueline. Mom's initials. The final gift she offered me before things became chilly. I mumbled, I guess I'm still the last to know. I looked at the envelope one more, my name nicely written, the afterthought that I always am. Like a visitor at someone else's celebration, Miss Odilon Morin. I didn't weep at all. I simply stood. I began packing after gently folding the scarf back into the drawer. Even if my recollections of Charleston had faded long ago, the city still had the scent of sea air and magnolias. I felt as though I had been cut off from a life as I drove up to the estate. The massive, ponderous iron gates open, as if the establishment itself didn't like my presence. I was surprised by how loudly the gravel crunched beneath my tires. Perhaps it was only my nerves. As usual, I parked in the rear. The front was off limits to us if you weren't Callista or someone. When the housekeeper opened the door, she hardly looked at me. Oh, did you come? I didn't respond. I simply nodded and entered the quiet, air-conditioned entryway. Everything had the scent of lavender soap and lemon polish, just the way Mom maintained it. Then Callisto's new helper arrived, tall, sulky, and brimming with prep school snobber. She looked at me as if I had arrived early for an uninvited gathering. I had no idea you were going. She said, I received an invitation. I gave a straightforward response while shielding myself with the envelope. She took a whiff. They're all dressed for the terrace garden, though. They were, of course. They appear to have been lifted from a catalog of country clubs. Aunt Dolores smiled warmly and offered me a gentle embrace. Her arms shook slightly. Odilon, I'm so happy you're here, my love. Your mother would also be. I'm hoping so, I said quietly. Callista was the only one who avoided making eye contact. As soon as I walked upon the flagstone, she turned. Her tone was sweet. And now look who arrived. I was unaware that they were allowing +1s to attend the reading. A few courteous giggles changed the atmosphere. Close, mostly quiet, yet apprehensive. I didn't answer. Callista lived on responses as I had long since discovered. Don't give her that, you also denied her oxygen. I sat down beneath the striped canopy at the long table's edge. I was not a member of their club, not with my $30 Marshall's outfit and flat heels. However, I was present. That made a difference. My gaze drifted to the blue full hydrangeas that lined the stone wall as I got comfortable, as if they were flowering just to exact revenge. I take a big breath. In the back of my mind, flashback arcs hummed. At 16, Callista receives a brand new automobile. I was struggling to pay for my bus fare. Because she earned a vacation, she skipped college. I'm working 3 jobs to make ends meet. They hardly tolerated me as their daughter. I said to myself in a whisper, the person they always thought would keep silent. Not this time, though. I noticed Callista sitting across from me digging for her high-end pocketbook just as the lawyer appeared through the French doors. She took out a folded piece of paper, looked around, and slid it under the table in the direction of the man sitting next to her Uncle Rowan. It was rehearsed fluid and fast. However, I did see it. I realized then that this would be more than a simple scanning of names and assets. It was a ruse. As soon as Mr. Whitlow entered the sunroom via the glass doors, the entire space changed. Talk stalled. Midway through, the sound of coffee spoons clinking on porcelain plates stopped. The air itself felt odd, like if it contained something weighting and thick. I pretended that I hadn't just watched my sister sneak anything under the tablecloth while I sat motionless with my hands folded neatly in my lap. Mr. Whitlow nodded courteously and cleared his throat. I appreciate everyone's attendance. I'll try my best to be short and considerate because I understand that this is a trying moment. Like she was trying out for a soap show, Callista got up from her velvet chair. Her expression was set in serious composure. She took a position next to the lawyer and put a hand on his arm as if they were longtime companions. Hopefully this won't be one of Odilon's surprises. She laughed sharply and brightly. The ensuing quiet wasn't encouraging. It had a burden. A sort of clumsy pact that nobody would oppose her. My cheeks flushed, but I remained silent. Give her a chance. Whitlow blinked slightly as if he hadn't heard her remark before, but he continued. Carefully, as if waiting would make the next step easier, he opened his briefcase. We'll start by verifying our presence, he added. Please accept this as a simple acknowledgement of your attendance and comprehension of the proceedings, Odilon. He gave me a single sheet of paper with an empty signature line and a glossy blue header. I scowled. Only me. Whitlow gave a nod. Indeed. From my end, it was merely formality. Aunt Dolores moved around in her chair and leaned a little closer. More to herself than to me, she muttered. They didn't ask me to sign anything last time. She spoke softly but confidently. I read the paper. Lowe's company printed it, but there was something strange about it. Only the title, some legalese, and that signature line were mentioned. No other information was included. Please send me a copy of this. Silently, I said. Callista. Husband. Brant. The wallpaper for humans moved a little. I briefly believed he might say something, but he obviously didn't. With another nod, Whitlow retrieved the form and carefully placed it in his briefcase. Naturally, the carpet was streaked with pale gold as the sun filtered through the arched windows behind him. The air was sufficiently stirred by a breeze that brushed the sheer curtains for me to detect a hint of Callisto's perfume. Something flowery, sharp, and costly. Her cool, playful eyes tilted her head. The daughter who paid the most attention was Odilon. You weren't nobody answered. She continued, particularly after her mother became ill. Her frequent visits and late-night calls caused Mom to feel very bad. You know, like it wasn't enough. Her tone was light, but the weight of her words landed like a slap. She didn't say it outright, but she painted me as a manipulator in one breathless sentence. I didn't look at her. Instead, I reached for the scarf in my bag, that old silk square with my mother's initials stitched in a faded thread. I held it tightly in my palm, a flash of memory. Mom in hospice, thin as paper, her hand trembling as she pressed the scarf to her chest, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't let them take everything. I had nodded through at tears, not fully understanding what she meant. Now sitting in this room dressed up like a southern brunch, I understood perfectly. This wasn't just about inheritance, this was about erasure. Mr. Whitlow cleared his throat again. If we're all situated, I'll begin reading The Last Will and Testament of Maribel Wainwright. He gazed around the room, then halted, his eyes falling directly on me. You may want to sit down for this. The sunroom had grown motionless, but not quiet. The type of silence that hummed in your ears. I scarcely heard my own breath as Mr. Whitlow adjusted his spectacles, cleared his throat, and unfolded the document in front of him with meticulous slowness. He started reading the will in a tone that attempted but failed to seem routine following the last officially attested and notarized testament. He added the totality of the Marin estate, comprising the property, monetary assets, personal possessions, and residual income is being handed to Odilon Marin. A glass smashed behind me. I didn't even look to see who dropped it. All I heard next was a hiss. Someone mumbling, "You've got to be kidding." Callista. His hand, which had been lying comfortably on the table, surged upward, knocking over her nicely positioned water glass. Her polished expression vanished. "What?" She took a breath. Mr. Whitlow remained unflinching. "That's what the paper says." Dolores' lips moved slightly, but she remained silent. I sat still. I wasn't even positive that I heard my name being written. Everything. The pause followed, but Mr. Whitlow remarked, his voice tensing. "A clause is present." There was, of course. He continued, holding out another piece of paper. Miss Marine must live in the family home, manage the estate, and keep it operational for at least a year in order to receive the inheritance. No property rights may be sold, redeveloped, or transferred during this time. He gave Callista a quick glance before turning back to face me. Additionally, at this time, Miss Callista Marin is prohibited from starting or assisting with any structural modifications, financial reviews, or estate sale negotiations. I felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't tell if I was shocked or overwhelmed by the significance of that sentence. Callista sprang up so quickly that her chair squeaked backwards and said, "This is a joke!" Mom did not desire that. Like a razor, she turned on me. "Didn't you put it in her mind?" As I handled everything, I played the martyr and made all those late-night calls complaining about being left out. Callista. Aunt Dolores made an attempt but was cut off right away. She said, "No, no, they must hear this, Pulmo," pointing to the few family acquaintances and distant relatives who were hanging around the back. For years, she didn't even come. Then all of a sudden, like Florence Nightingale, she was by her mother's bedside rewriting history when she fell ill. I maintained eye contact with the tablecloth. I tried not to tense up in embarrassment, but for what reason I could feel every muscle in my back. She forced this on her. In the dark, I spoke to her. At the funeral, she did not even shed a tear. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I knew she would turn even one tear into evidence. I didn't flinch. Mr. Whitlow interrupted, saying, "Miss Marin, your mother wrote these terms in her own hand." In front of two impartial witnesses and a notary, the will was signed. She didn't understand. Callista lost her temper. She had begun to muddle things. "Dolores, you said so yourself." She was exhausted, I remarked. Without a moment's confusion, my aunt whispered. Nobody spoke. The floor was covered with gentle shadows as the sunshine poured through the huge windows. In a room filled with blades, it was ironic how delicate everything appeared. "Did she leave anything else behind?" I asked quietly. I had the impression that my voice was coming from outside of myself. After a moment of hesitation, Mr. Whitlow produced a sealed envelope from his bag. She did. "Odilon, she left this for you." I grabbed it by both hands. There was more than just paper in the thick envelope. Something heavy, almost sacred, was inside it. I flipped it over and found one folded paper with the seal broken. At the top was my name. The blue ink faintly faded, and her handwriting, my mother's signature, loops and slants, extended across the page. It began slowly. She apologized politely, but in a few sentences she said something that caused the room to disappear from my memory. Something that changed all of my memories of her. It wasn't until the rustle of paper drew me back that I realized I was holding my breath. The letter was weighty than sadness, yet lightest than air. I opened it cautiously and gently, as though the truth within may vanish if I went too quickly. I hadn't seen my mother's handwriting curl over the paper since before the tremor started. It appeared angry and frail at the same time. I read it out loud even though I hadn't planned to. When I said the second line to Odilon, my voice broke. "When no one else arrived, you did. When I was unable to talk, you prepared me soup. When your sister filed the power of attorney documents without notifying me, you remained. The only person who didn't beg me to sell the house so you could live there is you. Nobody spoke up. Not quite yet." It appeared like the old grandfather clock in the corner was still chiming. I continued. Like a whisper, the ink shivered. "I didn't write this because I was puzzled. I wasn't perplexed, but I was exhausted. I also want you to know that after she attempted to sell the house under my feet, I amended the will. The idea of being hidden away while strangers passed through our hallways was too much for me to bear. The sunroom felt abruptly cooler as I looked up. Like a monument fashioned out of bitterness, Callista stood. Clearly regretting wearing a tie, one of our cousins moved in his chair. I could feel the weight of every eye moving toward her because the room had moved just enough. I took no action. Finally, she stated that she didn't want to. Her voice sounded scratchy and strained. She was ill. Delicious. In a hospice bed, do you believe she could make such a choice? I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Rather, I took the letter and redirected it in Mr. Whitlow's direction. Could you verify when this was signed? He leaned in and adjusted his spectacles. We had 2 employees that saw it. The hospice nurse reported complete cognitive clarity the same day. I've got the paperwork. Callisto's face quickly lost its color. Did you push her? Silently, I said, to state not to accuse. While she was recuperating from pneumonia, you spoke with a realtor. An octave was added to Callista's voice. In the end, you have no notion what she was like. She felt afraid. Audilon, you gave her what she wanted to hear, so she clung to your voice. Aunt Dolores took over. Calm but firm. Don't. Any way you choose, you can spin it. But I was able to see her for myself. In those last days, your mother was more like herself than she had been in years. How about you? Nothing. I could have said would have affected her as much as the fact that you attempted to remove her from her life. Stung. Callista took a step back. No one moved, so she searched about for assistance. Even her spouse avoided looking at the reality, directly keeping his gaze fixed on the carpet. With the letter folded in my hands like a pressed flower, I turned slowly and made my way toward the front window of the parlor. Something that is intended to endure beyond its initial form. I said very little. She didn't want to be sold like a piece of real estate, though. I respected that. Then the quiet descended. However, it wasn't the quiet I had known as a child, the one that meant disgrace once. I had to hide in corners at family gatherings because of that, or act as though you didn't hear my name being omitted. Plans. This was not like the others. In years for the first time. I got no response from anybody. It wasn't shame, though. Fear was the cause. We went from the sunroom to the estate club's garden lounge where lunch was prepared as if nothing had just broken a family's back. Lined silver trays with finger sandwiches. Pitchers of mimosas perspired on the linen. And someone dared to play jazz music as if it would ease the pain of what had just transpired. I sipped black coffee from a fragile porcelain cup that I couldn't recall ever possessing while I sat near the distant window. Callista was drifting from table to table across the room. She was beaming and giggling as if she hadn't just been publicly deprived of her authority. The elder people were uncomfortably near to her as she leaned in, putting a hand on their shoulders and giving them grave nods when appropriate. Control of damage. Her gift was that. I didn't want to perform, though. I still had the letter folded on my lap. My hand's heat has now warmed the wrinkles. Beside me sat Aunt Dolores. Keep quiet. Be mindful. A couple of relatives walked by with uncomfortable looks. A few gave a nod, others only gazed. However, I saw something in their eyes that I had never seen before. Recognition. The sound of Callista's voice cut through the commotion. It's too noisy to be informal. Oh, Dylan and his mother have always had a special bond. She turned to face 3 family friends who had known us since we were little. She had a knack for playing the victim. Really, I simply wish. I only wish she hadn't taken advantage of Mom when she was most vulnerable. A slow, disillusioned sigh came from one of the women, a friend of my mother's who used to braid my hair on Sunday mornings. Not exactly under her breath, she said, "That's low." At that moment, Dolores got to her feet without yelling. She just collected her handbag, looked at me, and left the French doors without a word. I put the coffee cup back on the saucer after taking a leisurely drink. I wasn't being passive while I was quiet. It was fuel. I got to my feet, slicing through the air like glass without raising my voice. Callista, I said emphatically. I never had to control anyone. And I can verify it with every document. The room froze, with a polished grin that cracked just enough to reveal the terror underneath. Callista turned to face me. Please pardon me. I retained the documents. I stated as I folded my arms and signed documents, emails, and timestamps. Even the voicemail my mother left me when you secretly filed the power of attorney. The silence was like a curtain falling in the middle of the season. You wish to tell that untruth in public, Stonesteady, I asked. I will then reveal the truth to the public. Everything. In the corner, there was a cough. Another visitor shuffled uncomfortably. Subtly, people started to turn their seats toward me. Callista gave a sharp blink. Now her voice was harsher. You wouldn't. I gave her a direct look. You're wrong. Hold off for a week. Your whole life. She didn't answer. She was unable to. Now I was being heard by the audience she believed she had. I didn't have to raise my voice for once. I didn't have to be shady or have a tantrum. All I needed to do was express what I ought to have said 20 years ago in a clear and concise manner. I can no longer be shamed into quiet by you? I didn't hold off till she responded. I took my coffee, went back to my chair, and let the room take care of the rest. But I caught a glimpse of it on her face as I looked up one more time. Not shame, not melancholy. Fear. As if she had finally come to terms with the fact that I would no longer be her punching bag. Callista's smile had cracked by the conclusion of the breakfast. Whatever broke that day, though, didn't stop her. It increased her risk, if anything. I discovered a manila envelope stuck uncomfortably in my mailbox a week later. On the front, my name was typed. Distant and frigid. Inside, a summons from the court. She had submitted a move to challenge the will, alleging that I had forced a dying lady to change her estate and that our mother had been under emotional pressure. She relied on the legal concept of undue influence. I repeated the lines as I stood in my front hallway. Although the legalese was elegantly clothed, the meaning was obvious. I was being accused of lying by her. Turning the latch behind me, I entered my home office and grabbed the bottom drawer of the antique oak filing cabinet. Mom assisted me with my graduate school refinish. It became stuck. Perhaps a bit of dampness, but I opened it and got everything I needed. The red folder with the addition of my mother's handwriting on it. Third addendum. Notarized paperwork she had signed during her final month in hospice were within. The will has a comprehensive addendum dated subsequent to her first alterations. She made it clear that Callista had taken action to take charge of her money while she was ill with pneumonia. Copies of bank statements that Callista never imagined anybody would see again were even included, along with a letter to her estate lawyer. There were withdrawals for jewelry spa treatments and a down payment on a new automobile that wasn't listed as a gift. I suspected that Mom's log had been accessed, so I took the printed emails and sent copies to her. Don't remove these, Audilon. I recall the message clearly. In case I subsequently forget. I knew you'll know. And I was done allowing someone who only appeared when there was anything to gain to rewrite her memory. By midday, I was speaking with the legal clinic I had previously attended over the phone. Do you have supporting documentation? The woman on the other end of the telephone asked me back when I was assisting a friend in a conservatorship struggle. I have more than that. I have her voice, I said. I wore a blue blouse and ironed beige pants when I entered the county courthouse 3 days later. Simply said, it's nice. Tidy and firmly rooted. Even though the weight in my backpack felt heavier than ever, I maintained a neutral demeanor. Because of what it all stood for, not because of what I was carrying. Callista was on the courtroom steps as I passed her. After giving me a thorough examination, she muttered to her lawyer as if I were a bother. She wanted to brush it off. At the reception desk inside. I gave the cashier the red folder. She opened it, looked at it for a moment, then stopped. She knitted her brow. Is this the handwriting of the deceased indeed? Observed, signed, notarized. She turned a couple more pages. A tone fell from her voice. She whispered, You might want to sit down for this one, but not to me. Her coworker's eyes widened as she turned to face him. I didn't sit. I just stood aside and steadily signed the counter-motion papers. I was sitting in my home office that evening when light spilled across the hardwood, softly illuminating the scuffed edges of old files. I took a look around and let my breath out at last. Money was no longer the issue. Callista's attempt to paint over history was the subject of this. She wanted to pretend I hadn't spent nights in a chair next to her bed while the oxygen machine hissed next to us, and to forget the months I spent feeding Mom soup when she was hardly able to raise a spoon. Remove the sentence where I respected Mom's request not to be relocated, not to be controlled. She's not only attempting to make me seem bad, to no one I spoke out loud. She wants to get rid of me. The problem with quiet, though, is this. Allow it to sharpen as you allow it to build. Allow it to maintain its form. Shouting is never as effective as this, and I wasn't hiding this time. She incited a paper war. She didn't remember. I was aware of the original's burial place. When I left the home that morning, the sun hadn't risen all the way. However, the air was already thick as if it anticipated a storm. Instead of being thrown into the mayhem I knew was coming, I parked a block from the courtroom, preferring the peace and quiet. I saw boom microphones, tripods, individuals, with press-readable tags attached to their jackets, and in the center of it all, as I got closer to the square, Callista, my sister, was already in the middle of her act. When she wanted to appear approachable, she donned that lovely purple cloak. Her voice was shaking in all the appropriate places, yet her makeup was flawless. She told a reporter, "I only ever tried to protect our mother." There was a little tremble in her bottom lip. But Cash. People are changed by money. With a sympathetic nod, the reporter made a note on a pad. "We are aware that your sister will be here soon." Callista. For a brief period, his face changed. A moment of precise control. She certainly has her version. I stopped just out of frame, far enough away to be invisible, yet close enough to hear every word. That was her move then. Before I could say a word, shaped the tale. She portrays herself as the distraught daughter who has been deceived by her avaricious sister. Erase the proof I held with the cameras. But I was ready. I took a step forward. There's a gentle click of heels on the concrete. I wasn't wearing sympathy clothes. Just the truth hair pushed back, flat shoes, and a charcoal suit. Just the facts, no nonsense. As I walked up to the lead journalist, a lady in her 40s with keen eyes and a coffee spill on her sleeve, the audience became silent and turned to face me. She said, "Miss Marin, do you want to reply to what your sister said?" I didn't respond right away. Rather, I extracted a sealed envelope from my tote bag. Without saying anything, I gave it to her. She opened it to see a folder that included a notarized letter from the hospice nurse 2 months before to our mother's death, time-stamped screenshots and email threads demonstrating Callista wire transactions from our mother's joint account. It was written by the nurse. The patient frequently voiced worries about her daughter, Callista, gaining unauthorized access to financial data. Logged on file is the recommended independent supervision. As she looked over the page, the journalist's lips twitched in silence. Then she raised her head. "Where did you acquire this, ma'am?" "I got it from my mom." I answered. She was aware that this day may arrive before the reporter could react. Out of the crowd came a voice. "I can attest to that." Everybody turned. Wearing her previous badge around her neck, Nurse Jeanette stood close to the rear. Her night shift nurse was me. Miss Callista yelled and brandished a checkbook at her mother as I submitted a report. She was recuperating from pneumonia. That night, she sobbed herself to sleep. Across the plaza, murmurs floated. One man stepped back from Callista warily. Disgustingly, another woman mumbled and shook her head. Callista lost her composure. She said, "This is a smear campaign. This does not establish manipulation." She was dying. She was unsure about her actions. I looked directly at her, but I didn't raise my voice. She was well aware of her actions. After you attempted to transfer her to a care facility, she altered her will. She never consented. You wanted the home demolished and converted into opulent condominiums. Even when the architect was sleeping, you gave her a tour of the backyard. Callisto opened and closed his lips, but nothing came out. I took a step closer to complete what had begun not to threaten. "I said I'm not here to destroy you. I've finished acting. I'm done playing the silent one while you change the course of history in the middle of the day." The cameras swiveled in my direction. I didn't recoil. I refrained from grinning. I simply stood there holding the truth. Behind me, a storm. Again, there was silence. It wasn't mine, though, this time. She owned it. Despite my steady gait, my heart wasn't at rest as I entered the courtroom. It was laser-sharp and concentrated. No formality or notification of a bailiff was made. The rows were already crowded. Neighbors. I hadn't spoken to my extended relatives in a long time. Mom's old church buddies and the media. They were also present. From Callista's vibrant jacket to my subdued gray dress, I swept. There was no hearing here. It was a theater. My sister had positioned herself as the main character. She was only a few feet away from the bench with a folder in one hand. I was previously aware of its contents. During a feverish recuperation, she had forced her mother to sign the older will. Everyone stood up when the judge walked in. Then the air was cut by the tone. Our purpose is to complete the probate of the late Maeve Marin's estate. Both sides will present their evidence to us. You can start, Miss Callista Marin. Callista's throat cleared. This is my mother's officially acknowledged will, Your Honor. Notarized, witnessed, and signed. Copies have been sent to opposing counsel and the court. I didn't interrupt. Not quite yet. In that sickly sweet tone she often employed while pretending to be innocent, she went on. It designates me as the estate's only executor and heir, which I accepted out of duty rather than greed. During Mom's last year, my sister Oda Lynn did not assist with her care. She didn't show up until the paperwork was finished. I fear my mother was coerced, perhaps even tricked. The courtroom was a hive. Some reporters began to scribble. The judge looked at me. Marion and Miss Odell. Would you want to answer? I got to my feet silently and without fanfare. I moved forward with one envelope in each hand. Indeed, Your Honor. My mother has signed, dated, and notarized my subsequent will, a month after my sister's version was shown. The room fell silent. With a raised eyebrow, the judge motioned for the bailiff. My mother's handwriting ran around the flap of the pale blue envelope I gave over. Known. Unquestionably hers soft. The judge gently cut the top. He glanced. He gave a nod. This paper seems to be legitimate under the law. Date 9 July. 4 weeks have passed since the last will. Dolores Moran and Jeanette Holloway, who were notarized by state-certified notary Erica Plath, were named as witnesses. Calm broke. She stepped forward. She made it up. It's a fake. I didn't recoil. I just turned to face the AV technician in the courtroom's corner. Would you kindly play the file? The screen wavered. The judge nodded slightly. There she was. My mother was thinner than I recalled, but she had a serene look in her eyes that made the place quiet. Softly, if this is ever played. It indicates that Callista has attempted to mislead me once more. She attempted to place me in assisted living against my wishes, so I created a new will. She took out more than $8,000 without my consent after speaking with a realtor behind my back. I wasn't pressured by Odilon. She kept me safe. Everything is now hers because of this. It's what I wanted too. Clearly, openly, and to the fullest extent possible. The quiet was broken by a cough. Callista was stuck in mid-step, her mouth wide, her eyes fixed on the screen, as if it had betrayed her as I turned around. The judge's voice was forceful. Testamentary aim is confirmed by this. The July 9th will be accepted as the operational document by me. Unless there is unquestionable proof of fraud, which I don't see from this video and notary documents. Callista's voice raised. She was dying. No one looked at her, but she had no idea what she was saying, not even the reporters. The judge looked at me. What else would you want to submit? I gave a headshake. Just that I respected my mother's decisions and loved her. Aunt Dolores nodded slightly in the front row, a nonverbal affirmation, and I didn't grin as the gavel dropped. I refrained from crying. I simply stood erect. Permit her to scream. Allow her to conceal the reality. No need to yell any longer. The sun had moved to the west by the time we left the courthouse, casting a gentle gold glow across the stone stairs. I could tell Callista wasn't walking next to me without turning. She had remained. She huddled in the corner as if her own lies had finally caught up with her. This time she didn't shout. She didn't give me a glance, nothing but quiet. Not the type I'd known as a child. The one who made me desire for recognition. No, I had earned this solitude. Final, like the end of a page. The cameras flashed. My name was yelled out by reporters. Odilon, are you going to comment? Did you think the video would be shown in court? How long has the second will been with you? I continued. I gave them my weather face, as my mother would have said. The one I used for Sunday meals, funerals, and storms. When Callista said something sarcastic again, Romy was waiting at the curb in her ancient Toyota when I descended the stairs. She already had her hand on the passenger door. At first she remained silent, only glanced at me before turning to face the courthouse. Then it's back at me. As if she was gauging my level of well-being or whether I was only surviving by habit. Are you prepared? At last she inquired. No, I said, but I'm finished. It was a calm journey home, only the occasional pounding of my heartbeat in my throat and the subtle buzz of tires on pavement. It was getting late as we parked into my driveway. Everything seems a little softer, but it feels more honest at that transitional hour. When I went outside, I smelled the rich oak dry grass and the tiniest hint of the jasmine my mother had placed inside years before. Romy trailed me to the porch before coming to a halt beside the screen door. My breath caught when she took out a letter with edges that were singed from her purse. Known. I discovered it concealed under your mother's old wallet's lining. I said, she said, it didn't appear to be something you wanted random people looking through. I handled it lightly. Even though the paper was fragile and wrinkled, her handwriting and ink were still visible. The envelope was simply addressed to my silent warrior, my youngest child. I took a while to read it. First, I took a seat on the swing. In the distance, let the cicadas buzz. Let the silence fall. I then opened it. You were the strongest at all times, even if they didn't pretend to see. I'm hoping you'll realize one day. It didn't matter if they praised you. There some truths are not expressed. You lived, and you did it well. Mom, you have my undying love. It wasn't really impressive. It was not lyrical. However, I never heard her say it out, but it was everything. And it arrived at the precise moment I needed it. After I had given up seeking approval. Just tranquility. Romy produced 2 teacups. We didn't make toast. There were no speeches from us. As the sun set below the treetops and the porch light blinked on as if it sensed that silence was needed, she simply sat next to me. I glanced around at the banisters peeling paint. Callista would frequently complain that the flower container was too tiny town. Instead of ringing, the wind chimes clinked as if they were conversing. And I reflected on all the birthdays I've missed because I was waiting for someone. Every report card, the hospital visits for waiting alone on Christmas mornings. However, I no longer felt empty. I was satisfied. In a calm, steady manner. Because I was no longer living for their approval. A place at a table that was never intended for me was not something I was attempting to win. With a companion at my side and this letter in my lap, I had established my own place on this porch in this house. Callista may never say sorry. Perhaps I would be the one to break the stillness while the family continued to discuss what had transpired in whispers. However, lives had been spared long enough by that quiet. Not all wounds must be loud in order to be remembered. Applause isn't necessary for certain triumphs to be genuine. Story 3. Hi there, I'm Odilon. According to my family, I failed. Too soft, too quiet, too unseen to ever be significant. At meals, they made jokes behind my back, called me jobless, even removed my name from the business I founded. I allowed them to do so for years. They believed they had them under control and dismissed them both until the day I entered the boardroom. Here's the bit they didn't anticipate, though. If your own father had called you a mistake while paying a paycheck that had your signature at the bottom, how would you have responded? Tell me where you're listening from tonight before we start. What's more, would you have said nothing as I did, or would you have said anything earlier? When I got out of my car and gazed up at the steakhouse's brilliant gold letters, it was almost 7:50. I hesitated a moment longer than I should have. Everything I already knew was shown to me by my reflection in the glass door. This is not what I was dressed for, and I had crumpled my jacket on the passenger seat, causing it to wrinkle. My shoes didn't go with it. I entered, even though I hadn't had time to clean the lint off my pants. I was shown through the restaurant by the hostess, who smiled courteously, a bit too courteously. She continued with a hint of something in her voice. They're already seated. I feel sorry, curiosity. For a family supper, the table was too long. Chairs with high backs and dark wood. Pearl's father was wearing a golf jacket, and everyone else was their mother. My sister Isolde, wearing her typical soft pink cashmere, is encircled by her circle of admirers, while my elder brother Nathan is looking at his phone. I received a couple short nods and stares. No one got up to welcome me. I took the seat. Just past the swinging door that let out kitchen sounds, it was at the extreme end next to the restrooms. Each time a waiter passed by. Without saying anything, I slid into it. And then I saw the napkins. Everybody had an ancient name stitched in gold thread on a linen napkin that was neatly folded into a triangle. It appeared to have been steam-cooked. Gregory, even my dad, stated. But mine. There was only one paper towel sheet, not even a paper napkin proper. It was only a cheap square that had been pulled off, folded in half, and placed next to the dish. I gave it too much attention. Nobody spoke. Not even a joke. Nothing but quiet. The crueler aspect was that I left it there with a smile. The waiter stopped by to collect orders for drinks. I requested lemon-flavored water. Nathan laughed and stated he was still sober. Well done, sis. It hurt more than it ought to have. The topic of careers came up. It did, of course, always. Isolde glowed. My company is completing a purchase. As she raised her wine glass, she spoke. 50 million assets, both international and domestic. Next week, they're putting their faith in me to conduct the client presentation. They all cheered as if they were in church. Dad grinned and remarked, "That's our girl." Some of us leave behind a legacy. Then he came over to me. And a few of us. Try it then. The words weren't the only thing. The delay before trying was the reason. As if he had deliberately avoided gentler wording after considering it. I didn't answer. I tucked the paper towel away carefully after folding it again. Isolde leaned in my direction. At least you have a lot of spare time. Honestly, that must be pleasant. The grind isn't for everyone. More giggling, courteous, managed. Mom even grinned, but she swiftly steered away. In any case, Nathan, how is the deck remodeling in your backyard going? I sipped the water and let the chill to linger on my tongue. They believed I was unemployed. For months they had held this belief. I quit my last job on my own terms and in silence. I didn't correct what they thought. I gave credence to their whispers. She is adrift. She could be unemployed. She never had Isolde's level of determination. Give them time to reflect, because the floor they were standing on was what I was constructing. I surveyed the table. Cherrywood. All right. China. A bottle of wine that was more expensive than my first post-college income. They didn't even aware they were dining at one of my establishments, and the air smelt like hubris and truffle butter. After putting the leather billfold next to my father, the server came back with the check. Isolde grabbed it. No, no, I understand. Dad, don't worry. When Odilon is well again, she will be able to treat us. Everyone chuckled once again, brief and well-managed, like a laugh track from a comedy. I glanced at the waiter. No need, I answered. It's already covered. Is it older? Blinked. Purchased? I gave a nod. Household account? Dad scowled. Home account. What are you saying? I carefully placed the crumpled paper towel back down after picking it up and holding it between two fingers. I looked them in the eyes one by one. You're sitting in a house. I nodded to the server as I walked by him after gently pressing the napkin down. I didn't wait for their responses to calm down or for another remark. Before anybody had the courage to pose a serious inquiry, I left. The chilly night air felt good on my skin. With my keys in hand, I crossed the street to my car and tightened my coat. Headlights racing by, glasses clinking, and laughter from nearby tables filled the streets of downtown Atlanta. As I got into the driver's seat and shut the door, I let the stillness fall between me and each of them like a curtain. I did not switch on the radio. I made no phone calls. I simply allowed the city to pass by my windows. Still recalling the feel of the embroidered napkin my fingers were resting on the driving wheel. The irony-dipped, silky feel of it on my fingertips. Just beyond the industrial sector, where the gleam of downtown gave way to fading lettering and drab concrete, I was stopped by a red light. It was still standing when I turned my gaze to the left. The storage facility. Not much had changed. The siding's paint flaking was worse than it had been. The bones were the same as they were 15 years before, but the windows had been updated. I had bet everything on those same bones. I stopped. At this hour, the parking lot was deserted. The humming sort of silence. I let my thoughts drift while I sat in the car with the motor running. In the past, that building had been everything. I used what little money I had saved from tutoring and part-time jobs to sign the lease when I was 23. The room was empty with only a leaky roof and old cement floors. It was mine, though. I used it as a launching pad. Though I knew no one would take me seriously, I had this idea for logistics automation software that could track, optimize, and anticipate delays before they occurred. Not at that age, not with my name. I therefore made up a fictitious consulting business and pitched under that name. Everything was created from the ground up. Covered all night. I learned how to manage servers on my own, worked double shifts, and sent emails to businesses. One Sunday meal. I told my family about it at the time. It seems like yesterday when I recall this old reaction. She smirked. Fork paused midair and said, "What is this, like nerd fiction? Sounds like something out of a B-list sci-fi movie." Dad didn't even look up from his glass. You need to think about a real career, honey. Something steady. HR would be a great fit for you. You're organized. They didn't ask questions, just moved on. I laughed along with them that night, but when I got back to the warehouse, I cried for 20 minutes on the concrete floor, then kept writing code. Months later, I landed my first real contract with a major freight company out of the Carolinas. They didn't care who I was. They appreciated outcomes. The system worked. But when I shared a sanitized version of the data out of naive pride, Isolde took it, dressed it up, rebranded it. She presented it to her company like it was her brainstorm. I didn't find out until Thanksgiving. I stepped into the living room and saw my dad toasting her in front of the family. To Isolde, he said for saving the project at her firm. She's got a mind like a general. No mention of me, no footnote, no wink, just erased. I stood there holding a pie I'd spent 4 hours cooking and felt my cheeks flush. Mom clapped. Nathan high-fived her. I sat in the corner and stayed silent. That was the moment things shifted. Not only that I was invisible, but that they were rewriting the tale and leaving me out. I didn't correct them. I didn't pick out the emails, the images, the code with my digital signature. I filed everything softly, permanently. I told myself that if I ever got to tell the tale again, it would be on my terms and with receipts. My gaze returned back to the warehouse in front of me. It was no longer a shell. It now housed a shipping startup, one of several under my holding firm. I didn't use my name on most items. I discovered early on that it was preferable to be underestimated. However, I was the one who signed that lease. I owned the structure they disregarded. Additionally, the systems I had created in that very warehouse were used to process every payment my father and sister received. They didn't know. Every office they worked at had a lease signed by the unemployed female they highlighted. I did not look back as I walked out of the parking lot. Like it didn't matter to anyone but me, the warehouse vanished into the mirror. It was a calm journey home. All I could hear were tires cutting the tarmac and my mind replaying how Isolde had regarded me when I mentioned house account. In front of a sober audience, she appeared to be a magician whose act had just gone wrong. I was more at ease than I had anticipated. I didn't bother unpacking my purse when I arrived home. I drank a glass of water, kicked off my heels, and waited for the quiet to subside. There was no laughing reverberating through my condo's walls. However, at least they didn't resound with condemnation either. I went to bed after leaving my phone charging on the kitchen counter. I woke up to the sound of buzzing around 6:38 a.m. Ping, ping, ping. Before I touched it, the screen sprang to life. In the family group chat, there are 27 unread messages. I kept my thumb over it. I was aware of what I would discover. Before opening that stomach tug is familiar, something you couldn't ignore but didn't ask for. I gave Isolde a tap. Was that a scream for assistance or a flex dad? She has always been dramatic. She was unable to maintain a legitimate work because of this. Don't be hard on me, Mom. She had good intentions. I believe Isolde is experiencing another breakdown. The final word was a smack in the face. Disintegrate. When I stopped going to Sunday brunch after working 80-hour weeks and missed a wedding because I was flying back from Seattle with a signed merger deal in my briefcase, they gave me that moniker years ago. I didn't even blink my eyes. I just saved screenshots by pressing down on the conversation thread. No answer, no defense, nothing but quiet. It's out of strategy, not weakness. My phone then buzzed once more. Separate conversation. Liam. My nephew. Liam. Antonio, hello? This morning I noticed the group chat. It's incorrect in my opinion. I simply wanted to let you know that I support you. I stopped. It wasn't pain that made my chest clench. Something softer. Relief, perhaps. There was another message. Liam, too. I spotted this and felt you should include a snapshot even though Dad stated you wouldn't see it. A confidential side conversation. Solely to her spouse. Do not be concerned. When Dad retires, I'll take over as vice president. No. HR or Audilon is taken seriously by the board. She is simply the reserved person that attends galas. I read it twice then carefully again. The silent one. They came to that conclusion. I wasn't the strategist or the founder. Just someone who chose neutral nail polish and posed well in family portraits. I responded to Liam's SMS. You made the correct decision. Thank you. No hearts, no emojis. Just the facts. I then selected Leave Conversation after scrolling to the bottom of the family group chat options. It made no request for an explanation. I didn't either. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and poured myself another glass of water. I didn't even have to consider it. Emery has 2 assistants. Board consolidation is the subject. The senior personnel list for Phase 1 is attached. Every name was read twice by me. Isolde Aldridge, Senior Director of Logistics, Franklin Aldridge. Herman Aldridge, Vice President of External Partnerships, serves as Interim President. There was a commonality among all 3. They continued to believe that the boardrooms they entered belonged to them. Correct. They were unaware that I had provided funding for the last round of bridge finance. They were unaware that I was the holding firm to which they reported. Furthermore, they had no idea that their key cards would stop functioning by next Tuesday. Tuesday was not the day I waited. I was at my work by Sunday evening. Outside my window, the city was calm and dark, similar to the quiet that precedes a required storm. I launched a private browser window, reclined back, and drew my laptop closer. Nobody was able to track it down. The access link to Reynolds Human Capital, a consulting business renowned for its corporate culture rehabilitation, was typed by my fingertips. Reynolds was what most people were unaware of. Bought discreetly years ago through one of my portfolio's lesser-known subsidiaries. Executive division of the subject. Review of culture. Instant access to Julia Reynolds' body. Start a thorough audit of every employee under Franklin and Isolde Aldridge. Within 24 hours, anonymous complaint gathering will start. Every discovery should be sent to the board compliance folder labeled Phase 1. No flags, no signatures. Let the data do the talking. Internal grievances started to pour into the inbox by Monday afternoon. Some had just a few lines. Others resembled journal entries, after being ignored for years. We're fortunate to have a family-run business, he says, but we're not family. We are expendable. In front of the interns, she referred to me as Grandma in Heels. You don't get promoted if you're not related to them. Isolde once made a joke at a Christmas gathering. Unbeknownst to them, some people age out of relevance. There I stood. It was my 50th birthday. I read them all, not once. 3 times. An ancient scar was scraped by each line. I believed it to be healed. Inside, they established a little kingdom. Something that I made to be flat, equitable, and useful. And that kingship would fall today. Smug brick after smug brick. I was enjoying my second cup of coffee on Tuesday morning when the internal notice sounded. There will be a mandatory compliance review meeting. Time of Isolde Aldridge, 11:30 a.m. Officer Amanda Roth, Senior Consultant, Reynolds HC, assigned to Conference Room 3C. I didn't grin. I didn't have to. As old as heels reverberated down the marble corridor by 11:15. She entered my office with her chin up and her lips tight, and I looked through the opaque glass. After 5 minutes, my dad stormed into my office without knocking. What is this? He spoke loudly. Isolde was just caught in an ambush. Why in the world are you doing this? Dylan, slowly I put down my coffee. The rim's steam was still rising. The board took the initiative. You are aware that transparency is a hot topic right now. He gave me a scowl as if I had smacked him. Do you find this amusing? Do you honestly believe that the best way to prove yourself is to scrutinize your own sister? Calmly, I folded my hands on the desk. Although I believe it's past due, you are welcome to submit a formal protest. The procedure currently operates in this manner. Not tantrums in the hallway. He appeared to want to toss something, but nothing within his grasp would save him from seeming foolish. The shaking in the frame stuck with me even though he didn't smash the door when he rushed away, my legal aid. Emery, who was one of the few individuals in the organization who truly understood who I was behind the scenes, received a last command from me that afternoon. The folder should be left on the VPI conference table, no justification. Put a label on it. Preliminary results. Ethical issues. Verify that it's the red tabbed variety. Just presence, no autographs, no opinion. Before the folder was even opened that evening, the rumors began to circulate. And I was aware of the purpose. If they believe this to be private, hold off until the board discovers what they have been concealing. The night before the anniversary event, I didn't get much sleep. I was already dressed when the daylight began to peek through my condo's wooden flooring. Dark pants and a navy silk blouse. Hair in a tidy bun. Not a sound, nothing that demanded notice, just subtle presence and crisp lines. The same manner that I constructed everything. They wouldn't look. It seemed like a long elevator journey up to the rooftop garden. As usual, above the faint notes of light jazz music, I could hear conversation. No one turned, but my heels clicked on the tiled walkway to the reception. Not a single head turned to look at me. Perhaps it was simpler that way. White seats were arranged in rows facing a stage with gold and navy curtain screens on either side that looped a slideshow highlighting the company's history. I crossed my legs and gently let my eyes to roam the screen after finding an empty seat at the rear that was neither too distant nor too close. There were my designs. I created the UI when I was 23. When I still thought they would be proud, I covered the mock-up in that dusty warehouse. However, beneath the pictures is strong white lettering that highlights Franklin and Isolde Aldridge's strategic objective. Not even blinking. The montage came to an end. The CEO stepped onto the platform. A few board members came next. Cheers! Appropriate giggles at outdated office pictures. My father then came forward for the microphone exchange. His face hadn't changed much, but his voice had become even more assured, as if decades of praise had shaped it more deeply. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who has contributed to this legacy, he remarked. Hiba. A family doesn't get to create anything enduring very often. For emphasis, he paused and grinned down at the staff rows. Isolde, my daughter deserves special recognition for her leadership vision and strategic acumen throughout the company's formative years. Again, polite applause. Isolde grinned as modestly as she could. Then he looked at my younger daughter, Audilon, then toward the rear where I was sitting. I'm aware that you're still figuring things out. Continue. He laughed softly as if it were a supportive giggle. A quiet sound was emitted by someone close to me. Another person chuckled. Not in a nasty way like if they felt sorry for me. I got up. I didn't stutter or hurry. I continued down the side aisle until the atmosphere changed, until I was far behind the applauding and the music. I finally let out a breath after pushing open the hefty double doors and entering the lower patio. Continue. Not too far from the party, but close enough to be alone, I sat in my suit on the sidewalk. The echoes of their joy were too loud for me to hear. That sentence. It wasn't only a rejection, it summed up all of my contacts with them over the previous 20 years. Are you still looking for a place, as though I had been exploring rather than constructing? I gazed at the fountain in the courtyard's middle. As the early twilight dimmed, the water trickled softly over the string lights. I considered packing a suitcase heading home and vanishing. I could. I had the money, the obscurity, and the silence. However, a young intern named Kayla was interrupted by a voice close to the stone archway where two corridors converged. I recalled that a middle-aged executive was reprimanding her. You don't just knock on a VPI door in the middle of a logistics discussion, he said. A chain of command exists. You are no longer a college student. She nodded despite her cheeks crumpling. Last month it was her who inquired about vendor integrations. Luminous eyes. Quick learner. With an armor-like embrace around a file folder, she turned and left. I saw her leave. I recognized the stroll I used to take when I had ideas and no one was interested. I remember being made fun of for asking pointless questions in rooms I wasn't supposed to be in, back when I believed they may be correct. I tightened my hands as I glanced at the lights once again. I would allow them to steal my name, my space, and my credit. I would allow them to enclose me and pretend that I was still learning. However, it is no longer the case. Not after tonight. Slowly, I dusted the dust from my trousers, got up, and walked back toward the corridor that went inside. Perhaps it was time for them to hear my voice if they were brave enough to remain silent. Perhaps it was time for them to hear my voice if they were brave enough to remain silent. Monday morning came with a false sense of peace. The city was buzzing with its typical unconsciousness, and the sky over Midtown were a faint stretch of gray. I parked at the executive garage's 4th floor. As usual. Same key fob, same space. However, I wasn't simply turning up today. I adjusted my blazer, tapped the Bluetooth in my ear, and got out of the car. I walked silently toward the service elevator and murmured, "Start phase 2. Without hesitation, my assistant said, "Yes, Miss Aldridge." The system initiated what we referred to as a quiet lockdown as the elevator doors shut behind me. Only back-end selective access changes, no system-wide notices or warning banners. The cleanliness was surgical. The IT security team had already started putting the policy into practice when I arrived at my workplace. I saw the courtyard down below where staff were just beginning to arrive from my window. They were all unaware that by lunchtime some doors will be closed to some individuals. I went to the admin area and logged in. Zelda Aldridge and Franklin Aldridge are at the top of the list, having both had their executive security override removed. I didn't grin. Retaliation wasn't the point here. Control was at issue here, getting back something I shouldn't have lost in the first place. A notice showed up on my screen at 9:02 a.m. No access. An attempt to connect into the Aldridge Air server was rejected. Then another access was refused. The request to enter the F. Aldridge Financial Archives was denied. I turned to face my helper, who was holding a tablet at the edge of the doorway. Ensure that their responses are recorded. After giving one nod, she walked out of the room. A ripple had already begun to form by late morning. Demanding to know why her credentials weren't functioning, Azolda had barged into HR. I was not required to be present. I had surveillance footage logs and a timestamp. I let the statistics do the talking. However, revenge arrived by lunchtime. A flagged message from Internal Affairs buzzed across my phone. A potential attempt at character defamation is urgent. An anonymous, unsigned PDF that said I had falsified performance reports due to emotional instability is attached. It was tinged with worry, the type that conceals its claws with phrases like unfit and erratic. I learned everything from the file information. It had been made the previous evening on a machine that belonged to his former helper. Before she used that laptop to create her quarterly reports, I had seen its IP address. Careless, I stood up and closed the file. There was no need for a meeting. All I needed was a hallway. At first, she didn't notice me coming. With her face taut with fake serenity and her chin high, she clicked her heels quickly along the hallway. She stopped for just a moment when she saw me. I even remarked, "If you're going to leak fake documents, better encryption at least." She narrowed her eyes after blinking. "You're simply resentful. You weren't picked by Dad." "Did he pick you?" I inquired. "When I was constructing everything you stood on, did you simply talk louder?" Isolde's head cocked. Odie, he never thought of you as a leader. He didn't even consider you a rival. I moved in closer. He never saw, I said. For a period. I didn't wait to hear her counter-argument. Before the pain of what I had spoken had really subsided, I turned to go. I went back to my office and composed a last message to legal. To the Ethics Committee and HR findings of subject wrongdoing. A complete board review is necessary. Isolde wasn't imitated by me. I didn't take after my dad, I just hit the transmit button. After that, I wrote a note in my planner. 10 a.m. on Thursday. Conference room 9B full board. The gathering wouldn't be visible to them. Send out invitations before it's too late. The boardroom door had already latched behind them before they learned the meeting was mandatory. The door clicked behind them as soon as they had entered the meeting room. There was no loud noise, only a neat mechanical lock that made it obvious it wouldn't be opening again very soon. The board was to my left, legal counsel was opposite from me, and I was already seated at the head of the long walnut table. Nobody spoke. The quiet was effective. My dad scowled. What is this? Isolde looked around the room and her heels halted. Eyes flitting between the faces. One more check for conformity. Faking a half grin as if it may yet win someone over, she questioned. Calmly, I gestured to the frosted glass behind them. For secrecy, the doors are shut. You should sit down. After hesitating, they sat down. Very much, like warnings the chairs scraped. I leaned a little forward. Even a voice. Let's get started. I handed the board secretary a pile of documents. The members grabbed for theirs, opening the covers one by one. Shell company diagrams, transfer memoranda, and incorporation documents. Then came the actual surprise. My name, majority stakeholder. The place fell silent like a chill breeze. My dad's mouth tightened. This is absurd. Is it? I tilted my head in question, because the Delaware office of the Secretary of State appears to disagree. Your signature does too. That's right, I gestured, transferring Class B shares to a company that I just so happened to own. His hands trembled only a little as he turned the pages more quickly. Isolde was still standing. She ran her fingertips over the edge of the folder as if it were about to bite. He said again, more to himself than to anybody else. This is a trick. No, I answered in a firm voice. This is the past. I just wasn't in yours. The air was heavy. You could still hear paper being shuffled and breathing. Nothing else until I pushed a tiny black remote control that I had retrieved from my blazer's side pocket. I said, let's analyze culture. Voices came first, followed by the crackling of a ceiling speaker. Isolde, clearly, half of the teams are coasting. You don't have a voice if you're not family. Next. Laughter. The women left the room as her father spoke. On the back and forth, you save time. One of the board members tensed. Another blinked quickly as he glanced down at the table. I gave it 10 more seconds to play. I then selected pause. 3 months ago, those were taken, complete with your quarterly off-site refreshments. Someone cleared their throat. I think the board has given too much praise to the wrong individuals. Let's examine more closely at what you've been clapping for, I replied. Another shuffle. At the far end, the legal advisor took out a memo from his own folder. According to him, these and other remarks gathered throughout our research seem to be in violation of the company's ethical code. Clause 14 requires a required contract review where the violations are combined with share manipulation and the concealment of legitimate credit. He made a sale. He was pallid now. My father stopped talking and leaned back. The loudest sound in the room could have been that. The chairman's hands were folded. Slowly he murmured, Mr. Aldridge, Miss Aldridge. We need your resignations by today's end of business. My father sold after opening his lips and closing it again. His voice broke. This is not possible. I fixed my blazer and stood up. Did you wish to remove me? I looked at each of them and replied, to preserve your sense of power. The exact thing you attempted to keep me out of will now be removed from your memory. After that, I turned and went to the door and gave a nod. The lock behind me snapped open as soon as I reached the assistant who was waiting outside. I revised the conclusion since they had excluded me from the company's history. My clothing were still stuck to the boardroom air. I didn't sit down or let out a breath until I returned to my workplace. As if it owed me something, I went directly to the window, drew aside the blinds, and gazed out at the metropolitan skyline. Only this release, I said, turning around and tapping my assistant's phone. The assertion. The press release was all over the place 20 minutes later. The headlines are thunderous. Following an internal ethics shakeup, the company will undergo significant transformation. The new administration says nepotism and bigotry are not tolerated. For the first time, my name appeared on it without any concealment. Aldridge Autoline. Hundreds and hundreds of texts and emails flooded in. Current supervisors, retired staff members, former interns, and particularly women contacted out. Some people expressed gratitude in entire paragraphs, others just sent a simple thank you message. It was long overdue, humiliating, and overpowering. I came about it when perusing the online mentions. An old coworker from the early days that I hardly remembered shared a side-by-side picture. One picture was outdated, faded. Wearing jeans and t-shirts, our original founding team was standing in the warehouse, all of us smiling. Near the rear, I was partially hidden by a folding table. The cropped image from the same day as the other picture. However, I'm in the middle of the foreground this time. She constructed it according to the caption. They simply stood before it. It struck more forcefully than I had anticipated. Within hours, the post went viral. Desperation accompanied that virality. That night, while sitting side by side on a beige sofa and attempting to appear unguarded, Isolde and my father went live on social media. She had flawless makeup. He spoke in a theatrical tone with an almost tremulous voice. Isolde said, "She's been planning this for years." Justice was not at issue here. This was retaliation. My father, who was always understanding, followed up with Odell. She found it difficult to accept criticism. Although we adore her, she has been manipulating this story to harm the business. Together, we constructed. I didn't recoil. Others posted a retort, but I didn't. Anonymous leaks of screenshots from internal correspondence surfaced. Whistleblowers emerged from the shadows. Stories of arbitrary demotions, rude remarks, and exclusion from important meetings were recounted by former employees. Trends became apparent. Within 1 hour, their videos' comments turned against them. One lady stated I was fired after telling HR that Isolde made fun of my stammer. She must have been deliberate about that as well. Another person wrote that her father advised her not to dress too ambitiously. This is instantaneous karma. Silently, I watched it all happen. I then made a little video. I took a seat at my desk. No makeup, no lighting team. The lens and I alone. I responded, "I believe in truth, but I don't believe in takedowns. Silence is a weak foundation for success." I kept quiet long enough. I left off the hashtags. No editing, no music. It was not just a trending clip, it struck a chord. After declining earlier that week, our company's stock steadied before rising. Integrity was valued by investors more than denial. And in the middle of everything, unexpectedly something occurred. My home address received a delivery. A vintage cardboard box that had been meticulously packed and labeled in my mother's handwriting. Handwriting I hadn't seen in more than 10 years. A sealed package, a charm bracelet, and a few family photographs are inside. I could still read the little faded and occasionally blurred note within. Do not allow them to minimize you in order to suit their universe. You were destined to construct your own. I held that paper in both hands while I sat there for a long time. Her voice reverberated across the ages. I put the message next to a freshly framed picture on my office bookcase later that evening. The warehouse one, the version without cropping. But I was in the spotlight this time. I did more than simply modify the conclusion. This rendition was above their wildest expectations. It had been 3 months. The workplace was quieter now, yet it seemed more lively in some way. Free-flowing conversations took place. Hurried whispers in elevators are over. No more looking over people's shoulders. Just the cadence of individuals working fearlessly and efficiently. There were no double takes as I moved around the main level as I had hundreds of times before. Nobody is attempting to position me. No erroneous presumptions. They were now aware that the cloak was gone. No background pseudonym or borrowed title. I didn't hide behind the majority stakeholder or the project creator. I just strolled, and both they and I saw each other. A man in accounting smiled and nodded as he went by me. A facilities management woman waved a clipboard in the shape of a trophy. Even the intern I once helped get through her first briefing on logistics. She raised her head. Later that week, I sat in one of the breakout rooms with the intern. She hesitated, tinkering with the corner of her notepad and tapping her pen. I considered leaving, she eventually acknowledged. I didn't believe that people like us belonged here after everything that had transpired. I saw her not as a supervisor or even a mentor, but as someone who understood what it was like to doubt your own position in a space that had been constructed by others. I understand how you feel. But don't let them teach you to disappear, I added quietly. She didn't weep, but she blinked rapidly, simply grinned and nodded. It was the type of modest success that I used to believe was inconsequential. As it happens, they are the most important. As the days went by, as my father and I grew older, the ambient sounds turned to static. Neither had gone back to work. The consulting legacy of my father vanished into obscurity. Isolde attempted to open her own shop, but within weeks her reputation preceded her, and prospective customers began to leave. I'm sure they still held me responsible, but now they did so from a distance in dimly lit rooms that weren't theirs. One evening at home, with my mother's words still carefully folded next to my desk, I went back to that letter. I did more than simply read it this time. I put it in a frame. I placed it next to a brand new plaque that said CEO Adelon Maris directly above my computer display. Initials and email footers are no longer acceptable. No more editing speeches by others. There will be no more chairs at table corners. I contributed to creating my voice, my position, and my name. Those mornings were peaceful and calm. Now I would get to my workplace early, get a cup of fresh coffee, and walk into the foyer where it all began. I'd waited for an interview in the same lobby years prior, clutching a CV and wearing borrowed heels. While a receptionist looked straight through me, no one would ask for it. There was now a quote, not a catchphrase or mission statement, etched into the glass behind the same registration desk. Just the plain facts. Not everyone raises their voice. We construct spaces so that everyone else can at last. When visitors read that they stopped, while the new recruits took pictures, I would walk by, just being there with no announcements or cheers. That was sufficient. I revised the conclusion since they had excluded me from the company's history. In addition, my family attempted to shrink me in order to fit me into their frame, but I wasn't made to fit. I was made to construct new ones. Story 4. Hi there, my name is Odelia. In order for my brother's fiancée to receive her ideal home, my parents felt it was my responsibility to sacrifice my name, my credit, and my future. They lied to the bank and falsified documents. They grinned as if it were nothing when I told them, yet family members may smile while betraying you, and what more can they do? It didn't seem like a pivotal morning. There was silence. A portion of the Denver sky that was just starting to get pale was visible from my window, from gray to blue. Behind me the kettle hissed. Unread emails flickered in my inbox. By midday, I would pretend to respond. That type of morning reliability appealed to me. Not very dramatic. I was holding a broken porcelain cup in my hands. I'm not a morning person, it stated. I'm hardly human. A joke present from a coworker with whom I no longer communicate much. That made me grin. My phone then rang. Unknown figure. If it wasn't in my calendar, I wouldn't normally respond. I picked it up, but I hadn't dealt with it before lunch. Perhaps it was instinct. Perhaps it was foolishness. Is this Odelia Hartwell, please? Something in the tone made me pause. Too reputable to be a fraud. Too calm to be informal. Yes, this is Liberty National Bank's Brian White. Regarding the remaining amount on your home loan account that ends in 2048, we are getting in touch with you. I blinked. My mortgage is non-existent. He did not recoil. 3 years ago, the $800,000 loan was made available, under your social security number and name. A number of notifications have been sent. I didn't ever get a mortgage. I detested that my voice broke a little. I'm not a property owner. You have the incorrect individual. No, ma'am. We confirmed the SSN and date of birth. Every page has your name on it. For a moment, I stopped breathing. $800,000. I hardly had $800 in my checking account. He inquired whether I wanted a complete digital copy of the loan file sent to me. I was unable to respond. I didn't say goodbye as I hung up, then simply sat with their phone. Heart in free fall. At this point, I wasn't even afraid. I felt numb. I opened a drawer in my kitchen later that morning. Before I found it, I had no idea what I was looking for. A slender flyer. Generic trademarking. Greetings from Liberty National. 6 months prior to the date. Unopened, I had thrown it in with the garbage mail. It was a pre-approved envelope with my name put on it. I then opened the plastic container beneath my bed. Outdated tax forms, medical expenses, paperwork remnants I hadn't considered for years. I kept seeing my signature on FAFSA paperwork for Jason on hospital authorizations. After Mom had her hip replaced, as I was looking through a family folder, I had always filled things out and offered assistance. Always have the ability to read the tiny print. Then something clicked. It was 3 years ago. Around that time, Jason began looking for a home with his girlfriend, Vera. I recalled them discussing it over Thanksgiving. Mom said, "The market is brutal," Jason remarked. "We'll find a solution. Family always does." I assumed at the time that she meant they would lend him some funds or perhaps assist with a down payment. Back then, the statement, family always does, seemed giving. It felt like a weapon now. I took no immediate action. I was unable to. I spent hours sitting in quiet. I gazed at my laptop without opening it. Like time passing, I observed dust moving across sunshine. Everything was harsh and slow. I gave my mom a call that evening. On the second ring, she answered. As brilliant as ever. My dear, I dropped off a pot roast. Did you get it? Thank you, I said. Hello, brief inquiry. Why does Liberty National Bank have a mortgage in my name? Quiet. Just enough time to raise suspicions. Oh, that. As if she had been waiting for this, her voice came back in. It's only paperwork. Jason needs some assistance in order to qualify. I take it you weren't doing anything major with your credit. I sat up upright. You used my name when you signed for a property. You're not really purchasing anything, and he needed it badly. He has been working so hard, you know. I couldn't decide whether to chuck my phone or laugh. The point isn't that. I wasn't even informed. With that tone of disdain, she replied, You always overreact. I hadn't missed it. Jason is worthy of a future. He's under a lot of strain, you know. We assumed you would comprehend. It's you who has always maintained composure. I was hardly able to talk. Do you believe he should have a home in my name? Look, sweetheart. She let out a sigh. You have no family at all. Jason gets started. This is more important to him than to you. It was quite informal, as if she had just borrowed a garment and neglected to return it. She wasn't upset. She didn't feel embarrassed. In her view, at least, she was logical. I didn't say anything else before hanging up. I couldn't have said anything to get her attention. I didn't get any sleep that night. My eyes were wide open as I lay in bed watching the ceiling spin slowly like a carousel. I had a fresh taste in my tongue with every remembrance of assisting. Acrid and metallic. Utilized. Jason's vehicle wrecked when I was 15. When I damaged a fender, Dad said it was the weather, after 2 years. I was informed that unless I spent every penny fixing it myself, I would never be able to drive again. When I received a scholarship to come meet you, Jason left community college twice. Boulder's mother stated, Don't boast. He is sensitive. I worked while I was in school. I made early student loan payments. Jason always had the newest iPhone, but he was only able to work for 6 months at a time. He was always rescued by someone, including me. It was me who had nothing to need, the one they referred to as independent. The person who heard that you're really strong. However, I was beginning to understand that strength was simply a code for survival. Whatever we do to you. I shut down my laptop without sobbing or screaming. There was a silence about me that I had never experienced before. Not calm, not peace. There was only a stillness so thick it was like gravity. They had used my name as if it were their own. Maybe because to them it did. But that was about to change. I didn't need an alarm. My eyes opened before the sun had fully crested over the neighboring rooftops. The room felt heavy, like the kind of silence that settles after something important is cracked. I pushed off the blanket and walked barefoot across the hardwood floor to the file cabinet I kept tucked beside my desk. It was an old metal thing I'd bought secondhand back when I thought organizing my life in folders would somehow give me control over it. I started pulling files, school forms, tax returns, medical consents, all the documents that had ever needed my signature over the past 10 years. Some still smelled faintly of printer toner. Next, I opened the email from Liberty National. The PDF loaded sluggish. I studied the small spinning emblem like it may flicker out of existence if I stared too intently. When it eventually showed, I zeroed closely on the signature line. It looked like mine. At first look, the arc of the O, the tail on the A. But then I spotted the R in Hartwell. It didn't dip. Mine always drops. And the Y had a curl that wasn't mine. Whoever did this, they had practiced, studied. I nearly had to respect the effort until I noticed the notary stamp. That's what made my stomach drop. The notary wasn't a stranger. It was a classmate of mine from high school. Chelsea Bertram. Although we weren't close, we had laughed awkwardly together in exercise class and shared a locker wall. I recalled that she had obtained a certification in an administrative field stayed in Denver after graduating and had a little child. I didn't inquire. I got my phone out and looked up her name on Facebook. In a matter of seconds, I found her profile. She still uses the same picture of her holding a balloon and having her hair pulled back in a bun from her baby's first birthday. A message was sent to her. This is Odell Hartwell. Hello, Chelsea. Just a quick query. Have you notarized a Liberty National Bank mortgage paperwork in my name? Some years back, my phone rang an hour later, but I wasn't expecting a prompt response. Hello, Odell? Yes, I did. Mom said you couldn't come in because you were unwell. Said that it was urgent. I didn't hesitate. She seemed quite distressed. I apologize if I did something incorrectly. After reading it twice, I read it 3 times. I felt as though I had dipped my fingers in ice. She didn't mean to offend. Chelsea had believed, but she was unaware of it. Mom, the woman who once reprimanded me for not doing my dishes quickly, was someone I believed. She claimed that I was too ill to sign my own mortgage, as if I were only useful documentation and not a real adult. My apartment's air felt thinner. Leaning out a few vehicles beyond a dog walker, I went to the window and cracked it open. The world continued on as if nothing had occurred, but it had. There was a snap. I was still seated at the kitchen table at about 2:00 p.m. when someone knocked on the door. I took a while to relocate. I had no expectations. When I opened it, the knock was stronger than before. Standing on the doorstep was a man wearing a luminous vest. I have a clipboard. A tow vehicle sat at the curb behind him. Good afternoon, ma'am. Our goal is to retrieve the 2020 Honda Civic. The payments are 90 days past due. Odell Hartwell is the name. That's right. I blinked. My name is that. Sure, but I didn't purchase that vehicle. He leaned the clipboard in my direction. My birthday. My entire name. My line of credit. That's me for sure. I never signed anything for a Civic. I added gentler now. My father gave me that automobile as a gift. He gave a shrug. Still using your name, we have the right to reclaim. As he approached the car, I went outside. More than it should have, the air hurt. I saw him crank the tow cable tight after looping it under the front axle. Some neighbors looked out from behind their blinds. One of them even ventured just far enough onto their doorstep to appear worried without uttering a single word. I refrained from arguing. How would I have responded? As the Civic pulled away, I took a seat on the front step and allowed the chilly concrete to press into the backs of my legs. I came to see that it was more than simply Chelsea's message, the automobile, or even the mortgage. It was all of it. I covered the food for Jason's graduation celebration because he had had a difficult year. When Jason was unable to pay the rent, Mom used my tax return to hang on to it, and he never returned it. The birthday card was the one that addressed our trustworthy one. You make things work. Accurate translation. It's you who will suffer the most, and you'll be happy about it. I returned inside. My intellect was sharper than it had been in days, yet my fingers were numb. I opened my top drawer and took out a yellow legal pad. I used all capitals when I wrote. Instances when my identify has been used without authorization. I then highlighted it once and again. Because I was tired of being silent and now had a list to create. Like it was holding its breath for me, the legal pad rested on my lap. 5 entries. My name was used as a spare key 5 times. They never came back. I turned the page and then turned it back. I wasn't finished. Not quite yet. I underlined the final word I had written, hospital, with the side of my pen while I stared at it. Not neatly under pressure. Something I hadn't looked at in months was pulled by that word. It frightened me, not because I forgot. I ended up in the emergency room 6 months ago. A response to shellfish. A mistake made by someone at a catered work event. The ambulance ride came back to me because my throat had closed up so quickly. In flashes only. For more than 12 hours I had been unconscious. My mother was the only guest mentioned while I was there, and I dismissed it as consoling. Mom would be there, of course, but I couldn't help but wonder what she had been up to during those hours when I was immobile. Unable to sign. Unable to talk. In order to access my old email, I opened my laptop and scrolled to the dates surrounding the incident. Finding it didn't take long. Well done, your application for a Liberty National mortgage has been accepted. 3:11 p.m. timestamp. I opened it by clicking. Go over it again and again. All afternoon long I was unconscious. I was aware of that. I didn't wish to make assumptions. I was looking for evidence. I called the hospital the following day. I pretended to be merely organizing my medical records. I spoke to a woman named Trina in records after being passed from department to department. Could you verify who signed my ER intake paperwork return in October? After a moment, there was some clicking on the keyboard. It appears to have been a family member. A lady named Patrice Hartwell was listed. Mom. I understand. Do you chance to have film of my room or timestamps for when I was admitted? Trina was quiet for a minute. Then she said quietly, You were taken in at 2:12. Nurse records show you were unconscious by 229. There's a hallway camera we can grab to confirm. She phoned me back 2 hours later. Her voice had a distinct tone. The tape shows your mother entering your room at 2:47 p.m. You're plainly unconscious. I'm sorry if this is upsetting. However, you don't move the entire tape, and the mortgage signature was timestamped 311. I stated she didn't react. She was not required to. I ended the call. For the first time, I sat down carefully and allowed my hands drop into my lap. I refrained from crying. I refrained from screaming. All I could do was watch the weight fall on me. The safest version of me for them to take advantage of was a signature that was forged while I was mute. Quiet. I almost forgot I had booked a storage unit, so I drove out to the outside of Denver that weekend. Since moving flats 2 years ago, I hadn't returned. Everything was covered in a thin coating of dust and the air was stale and dry. There were many items there that I hadn't had the courage to discard. Family records, birthday cards from occasions when I didn't feel honored. My dad even demanded that we save the boxes from Thanksgiving. Ornaments. I opened one marked Thanksgiving 2022 and found a picture frame nestled between a porcelain pumpkin and a long-dead candle. I recalled it. That year, it had been on the buffet table next to the depressing cranberry sauce and the cornbread stuffing. Nobody is 8, as the Hartwell family my dad had proudly exhibited it. My parents' brother Jason and his girlfriend were seen in front of our house in the picture inside. It didn't include me. I blinked. That day I had been there. To get that supper, I had driven 3 hours. Mom said that not everyone enjoys chocolate, so I even packed dessert, which included lemon bars and pecan pie. After more investigation, I discovered an envelope containing original photo prints that were still in the drugstore's glossy wrapper. I took it out. We were there. Every one of us. I was one of them. With one arm slung over Jason's shoulder, I stood directly between my parents. I was dressed in my favorite fall sweater, which was burnt orange. I had been cut out. Not in a symbolic sense, literally. They removed me from the picture. The package was still open in my lap when I sat down firmly on the concrete floor. Above, the bright light bulb flashed time and again. They had done more than simply sign my name. They had begun to remove me from records, judgments, and memories. I wasn't only the fallback option. The unseen one was me. I held both pictures, side by side, one with me and one without. My hands remained steady. No more. I was removed from the photo by you. I muttered. I'll write one now. Erasing is impossible. I took a while to text her. I held the cropped photo like it was radioactive and looked at it for hours that night. I listened to both versions side by side on my desk the next morning. Me and me out, and I snapped a photo. After that, I opened a text message that I hadn't seen in weeks. I'll attend the dinner on Sunday. I only wrote that. I put the original picture in my purse's side pocket, zipped it up, and didn't look at it again until the weekend. It was chilly on Sunday. Everything felt sterile, that kind of late winter cold. It was well after 5 o'clock when I arrived to my parents' centennial home. In the driveway was the identical gray automobile, the porch light clinking against the same wind chime. It smelled like roast steak and lemon-scented floor cleanser inside. It was all too bright, too gleaming. Maris. As if I hadn't been silent for a week and a half, my mother opened the door. Observe who chose to accompany us. As though I were a visitor, she chirped. Not the mother whose life they were tearing apart piece by piece, not her daughter. My father grunted something that hardly amounted to recognition, Harlan. Ronan, my brother, was in the kitchen already. He poured wine as if he owned the establishment. His fiancée Vera appeared behind him wearing a white sundress with flowers, eyes shining, lips glossy. She pulled out the moniker and said, Odell. I'm very happy you came. All we were discussing was the wedding food. Hold on until the Pinterest board appears. Nobody inquired about my well-being. Nobody brought up the mortgage. Nobody said that my credit would be ruined or that my car would be repossessed. We took a seat at the long wood table for supper. It was a dry roast. There was too much butter on the potatoes. In that phony manner, when the food is hot but the conversation is frigid, everything seemed ideal. Maris jokingly mentioned seating charts. Ronan's laughter was too loud. Viera distributed her phone, which was loaded with pictures of cake ideas and table arrangements. I chewed carefully, not hearing anything, as I watched their lips move. I cleared my throat a few minutes later. Have they sent out the invitations? Vera blinked. Naturally. Have you not received yours? I took the envelope out of my handbag and set it next to my plate. All of them gazed at the front. A clean white card with gold wording with Ronan and guest inside. RSVP guidelines. Venue info. It didn't mention my name anywhere. A tailored invitation was sent to Ronan's girlfriend. His sister received preferential treatment. Maris chuckled tightly. The noise was too loud for the quiet. It must have been a mix-up, honey. You are aware of your invitation. Vera had to. Vera reddened but remained silent. I remained silent. I just picked up the envelope, folded the flap, and put it back in my bag. Like stale, stifling cigarette smoke, silence hovered in the room. At last, Harlan leaned forward while holding his fork. Odelia, we're all just trying to go on with our lives. You have too much on your mind. It's unhealthy. I cautiously raised my head to meet his gaze. Are you even aware of what has been added to my name? He moved around in his chair. Maris looked down. Vera stopped. Not in my opinion. I briefly feared that someone could finally lose it. Perhaps a human word. May confess something genuine. However, no. More wine was poured by Ronan. I got up and pulled my chair back with the gentle scratch of wood on tile when Maris asked if I wanted dessert. I said, thanks for dinner. I spoke in a cool, collected tone. At least be considerate enough not to mail it the next time you decide to write me a letter. When I left, I didn't slam the door. I felt something change inside of me, but I didn't raise my voice, and I wasn't going to ignore it this time. When I walked away from the dinner table, I didn't turn around. I didn't have to. The quiet behind me was plenty. I kicked off my shoes as soon as I arrived home. I unlocked my phone and sat on the edge of my bed. A few weeks ago, while Vera was still acting like she liked me, she emailed me a link to a Pinterest page. It loaded slowly when I clicked it. Langford, Maddox, marriage. Hashtags like everlasting Langford gold accents, soft pinks, and Maddox at the end. I looked through the gift registry, bridesmaid outfits, table settings, and finally the family moments section. Not a single picture included me. Not one. I believed I had shattered the phone's screen as my palm became tighter around it. Vera sent me a casual text message 2 days later as if nothing had occurred. Would you want to get coffee? Only us. Not a drama. Promise. After a long while of staring at the computer, I responded back. Yes, a little cafe 2 blocks from my flat is where we first met. I arrived early. Choose a table close to the rear. Vera was late by 10 minutes. As flawless as ever, with flawless curls and a subtle scent that exuded well-thought-out effort. She grinned as if it were breakfast. I appreciate you coming. I wanted to make everything clear. I gave a nod but remained silent. Despite not adding anything to her tea, she sat across from me and stirred it. You're going through a lot, I realize that. How stressful all of this has been is beyond me, but you know, Odelia, this is Ronan's moment. He sincerely cares that everything happens without a hitch. I could detect the salt behind her sugar-coated tone. I only hope, she murmured, raising her large, phony, worried eyes to me. The wedding won't be a scene because of you. Your parents, especially your mother, would be very saddened by it. After you were finished, I blinked after staring at her for a long moment. She laughed breathlessly. I wasn't trying to be cruel. I am aware. I waited for a moment before she moved. She stated she had to see a florist after finishing her tea too soon. We skipped the farewell hug. I had trouble sleeping that night. Her voice kept replaying in my head. It's Ronan's turn. Keep your parents happy. After getting up, I opened my old text folder and switched on the lamp. I hadn't looked through it in a long time. They are caught between a mountain of health insurance papers and W-2s. Was 1090-80. A Ronan's college tuition statement from when we were all struggling to make ends meet during the recession. Now I could recall it well. He had required assistance and I had some remaining financial aid. A check had been issued straight to the student's account. It felt right at the time. Family was helpful. Family. We attended my mother's birthday dinner a few years later. It was Ronan who spoke. He always enjoyed giving speeches in which he expressed gratitude to our parents for giving up everything so that he could graduate debt-free. No one mentioned me. Nothing. With that recollection crushing down on my chest, I sat down on my floor and waited. Money, the wedding, and the mortgage weren't the only factors. Every time they removed something from me, it was that. Time. Identity credit, and made me feel self-centered for observing. I took out the yellow legal pad, inserted 2 additional bullet points, and flicked past the earlier notes. Paid the tuition for Ronan. Not acknowledged. Vera caution. Manipulation of emotions in the sake of maintaining unity within the family. After that, I looked at the page for a while. I didn't weep, even if the words were a little hazy. In all capitals, I picked up a new sheet at the top. Wedding day is what I wrote. I put a strong line underneath it. They assume that because I'm silent, I won't do anything. I'd been listening, but I whispered, observing, recalling. They were also unprepared for the next step. The night I circled the wedding day, I didn't sleep. I was walking a tightrope. It only takes one thought to shatter. I sat on the floor surrounded by documents, files, screenshots, and that yellow legal pad while the morning light trickled through the blinds. Then there was a ping. I hadn't spoken to Clarice in years, but she sent me a direct message. Together we had studied political science at CU Boulder. She didn't say much. Hello, is this TikTok your name? I immediately thought of you. I click on the link. A drone shot swooping down on a freshly painted suburban home with cream exterior, black trim, and a broad smiling porch opened the film, which was accompanied by lively music. Vera's voice sounded bright and syrupy. Finally, we closed on the house of our dreams. We are grateful to everyone who had faith in us. I paused the frame. It was there. The address. I didn't have to make sure. Since it was still in my name, I knew it by heart. I got up too fast and knocked the pad over. My knees gave out. My breathing became labored. The deed I printed from the Liberty National Bank homepage was in the folder, so I fumbled through it and placed it next to my laptop. Odelia Hartwell is the mortgage holder. Not even the title had been transferred. I watched the video again and read the comments this time. This identical home vibe is manifesting in a couple of aims. You guys got the door paint from where they were leveraging my online influence to get likes and acclaim. Their platform, their leverage was my name. And I'd been the silent one long enough. By midday, I was pacing my apartment with the windows shut, the air stagnant and warm. I texted Sloan, a buddy from back when I did temp admin jobs. She was now a legal analyst with a mid-sized Denver business. Could I visit today? Her response naturally. Are you all right? I said yes, but I wasn't. After an hour, I was seated across from her in a drab conference room that had the scent of ambition and toner. My file appeared on Sloan's screen. She knitted her brow. Yes, Della, you have 5 outstanding debts that are in your name, 3 of which are connected to accounts or properties that aren't used by the main users. She bent over. It's not a coincidence. This appears to be patterned, even if your family is the only one involved. I felt sick to my stomach. A trend. Just above a whisper, I inquired. She described it as a plan. This might be viewed by a class action attorney as a purposeful framework for identity exploitation. Not all you are is a victim. They have been using you as their mechanism, like a freight train mechanism, the term struck me. To them, I was not a person. A credit score was me. I can recommend a specialist to you, Sloan added. She is harsh and deals with situations of familial deception. I gave a nod. Every item that was reported and every questionable overlap was printed down by her. Back at home, I gathered the papers like armor. I opened a new browser window, spread the documents on my bed, and entered Bank Fraud Division Liberty National Report Identity Abuse. I hovered over the subject line, clicked the form, and uploaded my supporting documents. After that, I suspected fake ownership, typed urgent mortgage dispute, and pushed submit. The response arrived just before dawn. We have launched an inquiry. Please provide an identification that has been notarized. I read it 3 times. However, something that had been tight inside of me for weeks finally relaxed. I wasn't shouting into space for once. There was a listener. An official, perhaps. I shut off my laptop and gazed at the ceiling for a while, allowing myself to experience it. Moving. Real, perhaps, but little. I was outside the downtown office at 9 in the morning. Lowry Kessler and Browner had been referenced by Sloan. The nameplate on the glass entrance glittered inside the ancient brick structure with steel-framed windows. I was greeted by the aroma of citrus cleanser and copier ink. 10 minutes after I submitted my name, I was seated across from Mr. Clay Browner, a guy with a voice like sandpaper and weary eyes. Without a word, he glanced through the folders I brought. He sometimes murmured something, recurring patterns in conduct, misuse of power of attorney, fraud inside the family. You're not the first Hartwell I've seen, he replied bluntly after giving me a quick glance. In the past 7 years, that name has been connected to 3 instances. All of them were quiet communities. Hartwell, I blinked. He gave a nod. Family, have faith, mistreatment. It's more prevalent than most people realize, particularly with golden child relationships and strong control parents. It can be classified under organized fraud legislation after it is adequately recorded. Are you implying that they have already done this, not when it comes to mortgages? No, he said, shutting the file. However, with medical debt, business loans, and even auto titles. Your situation, it has teeth. I felt taller as I made my way back to the parking lot. Not secure, not quite yet, but rooted. I heard my name being called from behind me at that moment. I neatly twisted the hair of a woman wearing a navy jacket, moved forward. Her eyes were familiar to me, but not her face. Back while we were still talking, I had already seen them in pictures on Ronan's phone. It came together. Soraya. In response to my silence, she remarked, "His ex is me." Naturally. She wasted no time. He leased an automobile under my identity, said that it was only transitory. Also had a loan authorized. The address on the documents was revealed to me when a collector contacted. Your parents' home drive Maddox. I gazed at the document. She gave me a 5-year-old debt statement. I wasn't surprised. I just made sure. Everyone believes Ronan, even if I attempted to tell them. So endearing. He spins everything like it's nothing, she said. Silences you by gaslighting you. I had an odd rush. Not yet, not with rage. More like contentment. Verification. The narrative that I had been living in solitude was no longer exclusive to me. Thank you, I said. You won't believe how much this helps. After giving me a nod, she lightly caressed my arm. You're not insane. I gave Sloan a call later that day and left a message. We have a witness that supports our claims. Soraya is her name. She has documents. I then made a call to my house. Dinner time was nearly here. They would be at the table, I knew. Avoiding one other's gaze, they passed roles. It was Mary who answered after the third ring. I said, "Hello, Mom." I spoke in a calm, measured tone. "Oh, Odelia." She spoke in a clipped tone. "You ought to advise Ronan to get legal counsel." Then silence. "Are you putting your own family at danger?" "No," I responded coolly. "I'm making predictions. After completing a frozen lasagna that I hardly tasted, click that night. To retrieve something from my car, I walked downstairs. It took me a moment to see the glass. It's too late. The sharp confetti of dazzling shards scattered on the sidewalk. Someone had smashed in my driver's side window. I remained still. It was no longer even startling, so I simply looked. Next up, a sticky note gently fluttered against the gearbox. The writing was sloppy and nearly juvenile. Take a step back. It was not picked up by me. After locking my door and going upstairs, I sat down at my desk, opened a new document, and began to write down everything. The sight of the glass did not make me wince. I didn't have to. I had already come to terms with the fact that they might do worse. Rather, I took a photo of the broken window. Next came the menacing message that was put on my passenger seat. Both were forwarded to Sloan. My message was brief. They got more intense. Let's move forward. That morning, the air was crisp. It is the type of cold that awakens you without your consent. I drove to the downtown legal mediation after putting on my heavy coat. My window has been temporarily repaired using duct tape and transparent plastic. The voice in my brain sounded a lot like the fluttering, screeching sound it produced. Unrelenting, a white-walled conference room with polished flooring and coffee cups arranged in neat rows as if none of us were there to wreck someone else's life was too bright to maintain inside the hearing room. However, it was the problem. Mine had already been damaged by them. Sitting across the table, clothed as if the strain hadn't yet penetrated their pores, were Ronan and Vera. Vera smiled tightly at me. Ronan didn't even glance at me. The representative for Liberty National cleared his throat. We're here to examine the property-related mortgage dispute. Juniper Hill Lane 731. I composedly laid out the hospital timestamps, the notarized affidavit, and my signature overlays on previous legal documents. My voice cracked like a virus as each slide I clicked through struck like a silent gavel. We believe she had given her consent. We believe she was aware. The HOA board remained steadfast until the investigation was finished. Due to legal liability, your renovation permits have been suspended, and you have 30 days to leave the property. The back of Ronan's chair scraped. This is absurd. It's us who make that place better. You used money that wasn't yours to turn it. I looked him square in the eye as I spoke. By evening, I was back in my apartment when I heard the knock. I knew it before I opened the door. It was Maris. Her eyes looked heavier than I remembered, her hands trembling as she clutched the hem of her cardigan. She didn't ask to come in. She just stood there on my welcome mat like a ghost who didn't know she died. We just wanted Ronan to have a future, she whispered. You were always fine. Odelia. No, I said evenly. I was always invisible. There is a distinction. I handed her a sealed envelope. Copies of the debt reports, the forensic signature analysis, and a timeline of every theft under my name. You'll need this, I said. The law's coming next. She nodded once but didn't argue. She looked older, like all the denial had finally sunk through her skin. When she left, she didn't say goodbye. Later that night, I opened a cedar box from my childhood closet, the one I used to hide birthday cards and drawings inside. Beneath folded construction paper was a yellowed envelope I'd never opened before. The handwriting was unmistakable. Grandma. My breath caught. Inside the letter was simple, but the words hit with the weight of every quiet moment I'd ever swallowed. They did this to me too. Once your mother and her sister. Don't let them define you, darling. Take your name back. I read it 3 times before I set it down. I stood at the window, Denver's skyline glowing faintly against the night. I felt still centered. Not triumphant, not bitter. Just ready. You used my name like it belonged to you, I whispered, but I reclaimed it. My phone buzzed beside me. Court clerk. Subject line filing acceptable. You will be advised of your hearing date. I grinned. Not because I won, but because I finally showed up for me. The courtroom was silent. Quiet in the way. Only locations loaded with judgment, maybe. I sat alone at the plaintiff's table, hands folded, breath steady. Across the aisle stood a man in a gray suit representing Ronan and Vera. No eye contact, no acknowledgement, just paperwork and silence. Mr. Browner, my attorney, leaned in and slid a single page toward me. You don't have to speak, Odelia, but if you do, make it count. I nodded, but I already knew I wasn't going to say a word. The judge, a woman in her 60s, with sharp eyes and a voice like slate, read the decision clearly without drama. The mortgage was voided. My name cleared, credit restitution ordered in full. Then she made an unexpected addition. A pattern of coercive financial abuse within the family structure is acknowledged by this court. This is a formal warning to Maris Maddox and Harlan Maddox. There will be civil penalties for any additional involvement in their children's financial affairs. Behind me, I heard a shift. I headed for the courthouse steps without looking out. Maris was sitting by herself on a bench when I noticed her. Her hands were clenched tightly on her lap and her back was straight. When I went by, she didn't look up. I didn't stop. Back home, I packed quietly. It didn't take long, just a few boxes of what I actually needed, what actually mattered. I wasn't running, I was stepping away cleanly, deliberately. Before leaving, I took the original family photo, the one they'd cropped me out of, and slid it into an envelope. I taped it to my front door. No note, no signature. Just that image, whole and untouched. Let them decide what it meant. 2 weeks later, I stood behind a small wooden booth at a weekend artisan market in Boulder. My hands smelled like clay and lavender oil. I'd started throwing pottery again. The mugs were a little lopsided, the glaze a bit too thick, but people smiled when they picked them up. A woman with gray-streaked hair held one in her hand. The side read reclamation. She asked why that word. I smiled because it wasn't supposed to exist. But it does. She bought 2 that night. Back at my apartment, I made tea and stepped out onto the small balcony that overlooked a quiet alley. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No one else's name was on the lease. No one else's fingerprints on my choices. I watched the steam rise from the cup. No phone calls, no guilt. No one telling me to be the bigger person. Nothing but quiet. But not the kind that eats at you. The kind that heals. They had used my name like it belonged to them. They signed borrowed erased, believing I'd never make a sound. But I didn't need noise to be heard. I walked away. No screaming, no threat. Nothing but quiet. Silence